Abot-kamay. This is in celebration of the 33rd year of passing of the Generics Act or RA 6675. So we are happy to see that today we have a very diverse audience, no? We have with us participants from the public sector. I think we have participants from the DOH offices, Centers for Health Development, other colleagues in the government, our government partners such as the WHO, and our partners from the private sector and different patient advocacy groups. So, consistent with the principles of universal healthcare, our initiatives in strengthening access to medicines and their generic counterparts involves a whole of society, whole of systems, and whole of government approach. So, yesterday, this was emphasized greatly by our speakers through their presentations. We heard from Ms. Barcelona from the WHO, the global directions on strengthening pharmaceutical manufacturing and supply, with particular emphasis on the initiatives on intellectual property, on trade, on trade in healthcare, and global level initiatives for local manufacturing to promote timely and affordable access to essential products. Dr. Ko from Epimetrics also presented preliminary findings from the implementation review of the Philippine Medicines Policy, alongside with the recommendations and ways forward for the Philippine Medicines Policy 2020 to 2030. DG Eric Domingo from the Food and Drug Administration also shared the efforts of the FDA in supporting the local generics industry through efficient regulatory processes. His presentation particularly emphasized on how the FDA continues to streamline its processes and systems even with the ongoing pandemic. Incentive mechanisms for local manufacturing and production of vaccines and other pharmaceutical products were also shared to us by Director Cory De Chosa from the DTI Board of Investments to show how the government supports local pharmaceutical development in the country. Building on both presentations, Executive Director Montoya from the Philippine Council for Health Research and Development updated the body on the current COVID-19 trials and the vaccine self-sufficiency roadmap. Through his presentation, we understood the short, medium, and long-term plans for improving pharmaceutical or vaccine sufficiency and reliance in our country. Lastly, Secretary DG Attorney Belhica shared how the Anti-Red Tape Authority or ARTA collaborated with the FDA, BOI, DOST, and DOH in developing streamlined processes to strengthen vaccine supply. So the topics discussed yesterday shall serve as jump-off points for our discussions for today. So to provide a brief program overview for the second day of the Generic Summit, we would like to call on Dr. Melissa Guerrero, Division Chief of the Pharmaceutical Division. Dr. Guerrero, the floor is yours po.
Thank you very much, Alex. And once again, we are welcoming you to the second day of our Philippine Generics Summit 2021, although we are holding it today via a virtual summit. I hope that our summit will be equally informative to everyone on the government and private sector efforts to strengthen our supply, especially at this critical time of the pandemic. For day 2 of the Philippine Generics Summit, so we are very honored to have speakers from the public sector and the private sector on ongoing initiatives of the different players in the market in strengthening our local supply. So first, we have our speaker from the World Health Organization to talk about the global situation on supply and drug shortages during the COVID-19 pandemic. We are also fortunate to have with us our colleagues from Epimetrics, who will then present a situational analysis of our drug shortages in the Philippines. We are currently working with the private sector in the industry, so that means the research-based companies and the local industry in strengthening our supply, and we hope to get their input as well. So their ongoing initiatives to strengthen access to medicines. The local pharmaceutical industry will be represented by the PCPI to present the local roadmap of the local industry in strengthening self-sufficiency. And then we also have our friends from the Pharmaceutical Healthcare Association of the Philippines on their efforts right now to bring about solutions for COVID-19 and current ongoing partnerships to promote technology transfer to low and middle income countries. And then we will be provided with a perspective coming from the healthcare providers, primarily our pharmacists who are at the forefront of making access feasible, even at this most challenging time. We also have a consumer perspective coming from the Third World Network and AGAP Coalition on the ongoing talks or negotiation right now at the global level on TRIPS flexibilities and patent waivers during this time of the emergency. And we also have our friend from the Philippine Coalition of Consumer Welfare, efforts of the consumer groups in promoting the use of generics. And then we will open the floor later for a panel discussion so that we can flesh out the issues and also provide ways forward on how we can work together in continue to provide access to medicines at this time. Thank you very much, Alex. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Guerrero. So to start off today's program, let me quickly introduce our first speaker who will be focusing on the global situation on supply and drug shortages during the COVID-19 pandemic. So Mr. Juan Paulo Tonolete is a technical officer for essential medicines and health technologies at the WHO country office. His work mainly focuses on strengthening health systems through access and availability of essential medicines and devices. Currently, he also supports the laboratory and vaccines pillar under the health operations and technical expertise in the WHO country office's COVID-19 response. He is a nurse specialist by profession and an educator with years of experience in intensive and critical care management. He graduated BS Nursing and earned units in MS Epidemiology from the University of the Philippines, Manila, and later finished an MS degree in Innovation and Business at the Asian Institute of Management. So let us give Mr. Tonolete a warm round of virtual applause. Over to you po, Sir JP.
Thank you, Alex, for that kind introduction. And a pleasant morning and a happy Generics Awareness Month to all. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the DOH co-leads as well as the partners for this very successful event. And thank you for this opportunity. Am I allowed to share my slides? Hi, Alex. Can you confirm if you can see my slides now?
Yes, sir. We can see it already po. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so through the years, promoting generic medicines has been an important strategy to improve medicines access both for government and individuals. The generics market has continuously grown with the increasing prevalence of chronic diseases and also the growth in geriatric population. It has also grown with the high price of branded drugs, coupled with the high healthcare expenditure and its similar efficacy as compared to the branded drugs and coupled with its affordability. However, the current COVID-19 pandemic has put a spotlight on health product supply chains, highlighting several challenges in multiple phases in the global supply chain, from sourcing of APIs to manufacturing and then shipping the final product. Active pharmaceutical ingredients or APIs are essential components in making medicines. And according to the US FDA data as of 2019, the US remains to be a home of the most API manufacturing plants worldwide. And the European Union comes in second, accounting for just over a quarter of the world's FDA-registered facilities. China and India combined account for 31%. Labor availability and the cost advantages were mainly the drivers of expanding manufacturing plants in the Far East. However, manufacturing facilities count is a poor gauge of actual production. In fact, China has dominated the production of pharmaceutical raw materials, and then the volume of raw materials coming from Asia has has skyrocketed. It is estimated that 80% of chemicals used to make drugs sold even in Europe now originates from China and in India. Moreover, India is dominating the production of finished drug products. In fact, India contributes to 40% of the generics products to the world market. So even at this time, US, even Europe are already rethinking of bringing API manufacturing back in their countries to solve the problem. China's pharmaceutical manufacturing hub is concentrated in the eastern and southern regions. And Hubei province, wherein considered to be the epicenter of the novel coronavirus outbreak in China, is adjacent to these regions. Slowdown and or closure of global manufacturing facilities, particularly in China and in India, also impacted the supply chains. Like in China and in India, that are significant contributors to the global API output and intermediate manufacturing, the widespread city lockdowns, the transportation restrictions during the outbreaks, limits to limit the spread of COVID-19 infection, caused production shutdowns in almost all sectors, including their own pharmaceutical industry, thus resulting to the scarcity of raw materials due to the production stoppages and labor shortages. Right now, a much longer lead time is needed for sourcing raw materials. Supply of raw materials continues to be hampered as suppliers have not ramped up their operations fully yet. The transportation of raw materials and medicines are mainly reliant on freight capacity and availability. Due to the high sensitivity of the cargo, special handling of such goods is necessary and usually requires temperature-controlled storages. Severe supply chain blocks has caused a significant decrease in air cargo capacity, even in sea freight, and even in transport logistics. Freight movement is also affected with a lot of problems, including handling equipment and the insufficient availability of personnel. Global restrictions spawned by the coronavirus pandemic have sent transport costs skyrocketing for generic makers or manufacturers. Average shipping costs have jumped by at least 200%, and some reports even indicate an increase in shipping costs reaching as high as 400%. The economic slowdown and restrictions on the international travel also raised the price of global market. Export restrictions in some countries are also compounding the problem with the freight backlogs and the API manufacturing. Some countries restricted exportation of essential APIs to tackle possible domestic shortages. And all these situations may have also affected the price of generics. Not having a steady supply will mostly lead to price increases as a result from shortages or less competition. The WHO, through the reports from the national regulatory authorities and other member states, monitors possible shortages of essential medicines. Please note that the following medicines are based on at least 5 countries reporting shortages. Caution is advised as this list is not conclusive or not reflective of the actual global status. But in our latest list as of August 2021, the following high demand medicines should be watched out for carefully. These ranges from antibiotics to epinephrine, to benzodiazepine sedatives, antipsychotics, muscle relaxants, opioids, malaria treatments, NCD, particularly diabetics, anticoagulants, corticosteroids, antipyretics, and even oxygen and other related equipments. Hoarding and speculative procurement should be avoided, and care should be used to ensure the best use of available national inventories. Countries should consider allocating in-demand products equitably and in line with the public health priorities. Also, as of August 2021, there are newly added or reconfirmed shortages were identified for the following medicines. Antifungal medicines remain in shortage, antipyretics, anti-ulcers, antipsychotics, muscle relaxants, opioid and anesthesia or preoperative medicines. For morphine granules, although only one single country has reported of shortage, but the concern here is on the substitutions that are available since options are limited for pediatric palliative care. And last on the list are the drugs for diabetics. Animal-derived insulin has been reported as a shortage in some countries. However, given the limited manufacturing base of this product, supply could be highly constrained. So there are themes that are arising in the current situation. Owing to the negative impact of the pandemic, there are steps to be taken to mitigate the effect of the current as well as the future pandemic or incidents. So there is a call to invest and strengthen local pharmaceutical manufacturing capacity. Countries' supply of medicines have been vulnerable due to reliance from a single source. And investing in strengthening local manufacturing capacity may reduce over-reliance on imported medicines. In addition, governments can create incentives and streamline regulatory requirements to encourage or expand manufacturing businesses. The country's pharmaceutical system preparedness can be strengthened through better management of pharmaceuticals and commodities. Adequate and applicable pharmaceutical system preparedness and planning must be incorporated in the national medicines policy. Training and capacity building of pertinent personnel in both government and pharmaceutical industry is another way of improving the pharmaceutical system. And in many aspects of the pandemic response, public and private coordination and collaboration has emerged as a key to controlling transmission and opening the economy. Public and private partnerships is now crucial more than ever. Given the uncertainty of the COVID-19 crisis and unpredictability of the scale and duration of this global pandemic, it is imperative that the government and the pharmaceutical industry be prepared while keeping abreast of the developments. So understanding the risk in the supply and the efforts to establish the local supplies of chemicals and APIs is considered to be a matter of national security. And a multi-sectoral approach is indeed recommended. There are also short-term and long-term mitigation measures for both government and the generics pharmaceutical industry. For short-term measures, visibility of the suppliers or sources capacity is a primary short-term consideration. And this will actually facilitate swift actions. And securing additional freight capacity can also be a viable option. We should work proactively with freight forwarders to assess alternative shipping options. And governments can provide enabling environment to have these mitigation measures done efficiently. For long-term measures, we have to be proactive in assessing the suppliers' production capabilities, meaning the sustainability of their operations. We need to identify and secure alternative suppliers should the production at an existing supplier become limited or even halted. Governments and generic pharmaceutical industries must have and must also implement their own crisis management plan through the 4 pillars of working together, and that is communication, coordination, cooperation, and collaboration. The COVID-19 outbreak may be a wake-up call to the pharma industry and also to the governments. It has exposed long-standing vulnerabilities of pharmaceutical manufacturers that largely depend on a single market for critical ingredients and also in the manufacturing operations due to labor availability and cost advantages. So the situation remains fluid and the disruptions caused by the outbreak, both current and potential, will have an impact on the manufacturing and distribution operations of the pharmaceutical supply chains. So the current knock-on effect of the API distribution has highlighted the importance of strategically diversifying the sources, manufacturing, and procurement methods, and for the pharmaceutical manufacturers to consider reconfiguring their supply chains to mitigate future disruptions. So this ends my presentation, and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much po, Sir JP. So, Sir JP's presentation really highlighted on how the global situation is right now, no? So, our next speaker would be focusing more on the local situation naman. So our next speaker graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in Development Communication from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. She has also taken continuing education, master class in health literacy and community development from Deakin University in Melbourne, Australia. She is no stranger to public health research as she has already worked on projects and has also authored papers on drug and medicine management, program and process evaluation of different DOH programs, and on health financing, particularly cost utility analysis and benefit package development. Today, she will be sharing with us the results of the situational analysis on drug shortages and stockouts in the Philippines, particularly its causes, frequencies, impact, and management strategy. So let us all welcome from Epimetrics, Miss Joy Bagas. Miss Joy, the floor is yours po.
Hello, Sir Alex, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, loud and clear.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to share to you the results of this study commissioned by the DOHPD and funded by the Philippine Council for Health Research and Development. Interestingly, our study intersects with the topics that this summit will cover today. So first, let me give you a short background of our study. The recently enacted Universal Healthcare Law guarantees equitable access to quality and affordable healthcare goods and services while being protected against financial risk. This includes drugs and medicines. The DOH recognizes the importance of an efficient supply chain with good information system to track and monitor the movement of products and predict shortages. Thus, the conception of this study. Shown in your screen are our study objectives, which aim to dig deeper on the current drug shortage and stockout situations in the country. Our findings aim to inform policy recommendations and solutions that relevant stakeholders should take to improve drug security. This is a mixed method study using the pharmaceutical management framework of the Management Sciences for Health. We interviewed relevant supply chain actors such as manufacturers, distributors, relevant national and regional government units with mandates in drug security and availability. We also get the perspectives of local facilities such as hospitals, RHUs, pharmacy chains, and independent pharmacies. The stockout data provided by the DOHPD from July to December of 2020 informed our sampling to identify low and high stockout areas. Now, let's move on to the results of our study. Let me first give you an overview of the results section to facilitate the discussion flow. First, I will discuss the understanding of shortage and stockouts at different supply chain levels. Next, I will show you the frequently out of stock drugs, and after that, we will enumerate the thematic causes of shortage and stockouts and their corresponding management strategies at the supply and at the facility level. This will lead us to the implication of drug security issues to service delivery. And lastly, we will enumerate enablers and barriers to better understand the performance of our supply chain system. We elicited understanding of the term shortage and stockouts to operationalize drug shortage and stockout in each level of the supply chain. For manufacturers and distributors, shortage is an anticipated event when the supply is inadequate to meet the actual need. It is anticipated because they have invested in IT, data science, and IT infrastructures. The distributors highlighted that shortage is when the available drugs and medicines cannot satisfy legal requirements. So it may be available, but it cannot satisfy the legal requirements such as shelf life, technical specifications, and price structures. And then program managers have no explicit definition of drug shortage, but they relate it to program level indicators. Regulators implicitly relate shortage to any disruption at the supply level, leading to stock up. Local facilities highlighted that it is the ability of the supplier to provide the quantity needed by their patients and their customers. On the other hand, drug stock out for manufacturers, distributors, pharmacies, or our local facilities is clearly defined as the absence of actual drugs in their inventory. For pharmacies and retail facilities, prolonged shortage equates to drug stockouts. For the public sector, program managers and regulatory personnel see drug shortage and stockouts as a continuum caused by the prolonged disruption of the supply chain processes. They also use stockout indicators like critical buffer stock defined by the program managers and PMIS indicators or the system owned by the DOH Pharmaceutical Division triggering the replenishment of the inventory. Shown in your screen is the WHO definition of shortage and stockout intersecting with the key insights of our respondents. Now, why is it important to operationalize drug shortage and stockout? Defining drug shortage and stockout is a prerequisite in establishing a drug shortage notification system. In countries with established reporting systems, operationalizing drug shortage across different levels of the supply chain was challenging. This was done through extensive stakeholder consultations to come up with standardized and legally binding definition. So this ends the presentation on understanding the important terminologies. Now, let's identify the frequently out-of-stock drugs. Our study encountered difficulties to gather stock-out data. Only 24 out of the 40 facilities shared their stock-out report. Our data limitations only provide a glimpse of the 2020 stock-out situation in selected provinces. This is not reflective of the national status. The table lists the drugs that are commonly out of stock, grouped by their pharmacologic use. Overall, the findings are similar to the drug availability surveys conducted in 2016 and 2019, reporting that antihypertensives and diabetic drugs are fast-moving medicines with frequent stockouts. Now, let's move on to the causes of shortage and stockout and their corresponding management strategies at the supply and at the facility level. I will discuss the supply level first, and then I will go through the facility level. At the supply level, the respondents implicitly identified the causes of stockout in relation to any form of disruption in the supply chain. Two thematic causes zero in on supply chain system disruption and policy and regulatory compliance. In terms of supply chain issues, the respondents highlighted challenges in forecasting and logistics. For the DOH, data sharing on the quantity of procured drugs among DOH Central Office, CHDs, and LGUs remain challenging. This contributes to the forecast accuracy and uncoordinated procurement among these government units. Forecast precision may contribute to stockouts or even oversupply. It is also important to note that approved budget determines the final forecast. It will be a problem when the approved budget is not commensurate to the actual forecast. Aside from forecasting limitation, the public sector and the local facilities face transport and storage issues. Now, for policy and regulatory challenges, it was highlighted that timely completion of the regulatory requirements by the FDA within the acceptable turnaround time is a challenge. This pertains to CPR applications, variations, and lot clearances. For the DOH, lengthy and unpredictable procurement timelines also delay the cascade of centrally procured commodities to the health facilities. For the management strategies, the private sectors generally cautions their supply chain issues with stock buildup. Regulatory challenges were dealt with constant coordination with the FDA. Pharmaceutical companies and distributors will have to negotiate their shelf life requirements with their customers to avert financial loss. In cases of stockout, some manufacturers equitably allocate their stocks among their customers as informed by data and market intelligence. Private retail facilities would also resort sourcing from other outlets to ensure treatment adherence and secure the customers loyal to the drugstore. To ensure treatment adherence, pharmacologic alternatives were suggested as agreed by the patient and the physician. Shown in your screen are the management strategies of the DOH on the implicit causes of shortage and stockouts for the public sector. For internal issues, informal and formal channels were exhausted to expedite coordination activities. Our study would like to highlight that the mandate of the DOH is to augment the supply of drugs and medicines of the local government units and local facilities. On the positive note, there has been an increasing purchasing power for drugs and medicines, even at the LGU level. However, we are yet to complement the higher purchasing power with larger storage capacity, agile supply chain system, and more transport options. Thus, the program managers, our supply officers, our public health pharmacies at the CHDs, at DOH Central Office, and PDOHOs partner with the LGUs in planning their storage and delivery strategies to overcome these limitations. Let us now look at the facility level. High and low stockout areas face similar causes of stockout across different types of facilities. Selection challenges include P&F concerns, drug preferences of patients and physicians, and lack of special permits to carry specific drugs. They also face forecasting issues due to data limitations. No management strategy emerged for forecasting as it is closely tied to storage limitations and budget variability. Both high and low areas face sourcing problems due to lack of suppliers. This problem is more prominent in high stockout areas because of their geographic constraints. Aside from lack of suppliers, procurement issues are disruption at the supply level, restriction in procurement methods, and bid failures. Interestingly, LGU financing practices in low stockout areas also emerge as a stockout management strategy. A degree of flexibility and freedom for emergency purchase as needed through having a petty cash. While the LGU-operated public hospitals in high stockout areas, except Mindanao, revealed that all purchasing activities were centrally done by the local government. This kind of delineation between the hospital and their LGUs involves more processes and decision makers. This delays the replenishment of drugs and medicines. The next two slides will show the difference of the supply chain network between high and low stockout zones. Both high and low stockout zones reported similar causes of shortage and stockouts. However, there is an evidently strong network of local pharmacies, private institutions, non-government organizations, and local suppliers in low stockout provinces. Interestingly, war zones and typhoon-battered areas in our study sites have more stable supply due to support or donations from NGOs and development partners. Comparing this to the high stock-out zones, where channels of distributions are largely reliant on one central supply network. Now, let us look at the implication of shortage and stock-out situations in service delivery. There are 4 themes on the implications. One is insights on financial implications would include higher out-of-pocket expenses and incidental costs for sourcing medicines. Insights on patient or customer experience zero in on brand loyalty and customer retention. And then stock-out affect health outcomes when it leads to alternative treatment or delayed treatment. And then the quality of care is being questioned when public health facilities dispense drug near their expiration dates. We would like to highlight the noble efforts of these supply chain actors who continuously go out of their way to look for multiple sources of drugs and medicines to ensure continuous service delivery and avert high out-of-pocket expenses. These supply chain actors would often use their personal resources to go to neighboring towns, forge amicable partnership with other LGUs for stock sharing, and exhaust all the possible forms of assistance to facilitate sourcing of medicines with reduced burden to patients. Given the current situation of our supply chain, we want to understand why our supply chain works this way. It is important to gauge the available human and non-human resources are foundational to the performance of our supply chain. The private sector heavily invested in interoperable IT systems, data science, market intelligence, and they highlighted regulatory hurdles as their main challenge. For the DOH, the table shows that there is an increasing purchasing power for drugs and medicines in the last 3 years. However, the dramatic increase in drugs and medicines was not complemented with an agile supply chain system. Let us also note that aside from the procured medicines, the DOH also received donated commodities. Thus, the DOH experienced growth pains in upscaling the access to drugs and medicines, which was also felt at the facility level. Our study would like to emphasize to the LGUs and the DOH that the similar growth pains discussed previously should be proactively managed as we transition to the implementation of the universal healthcare. LGUs will have higher purchasing power, which may expand their supply chain operations, and it is very crucial to manage these possible growth pains by strengthening their supply chain capacities and by expanding their human and non-human resources sustainably. For instance, we have learned that some LGUs cannot achieve economies of scale as monthly budget disbursement limit them to order in small quantities. This is just an example of capacity building issues we have to address to improve local supply chain systems. Currently shown in your screen are the enablers identified by the local facilities. 5 themes emerged, and these are financing sources, policies, supply chain infrastructure, human resources, and partnerships. Adequacy of each enabler contribute to the facility level drug security. However, we already know that we face limitations on the first 4 enablers, and the 5th enabler were the strategies that keep these local facilities afloat to overcome the limitations. These are the local best practices that we learned to ensure stable drug supply and continuous service delivery. In summary, our study has 4 key messages triangulated to previous research and global and local literatures. The study found antihypertensives and antidiabetic drugs as fast-moving medicines with frequent stockouts and still consistent with the 2016 and 2019 drug availability surveys. Disruption in supply chain system and compliance in regulatory requirements within the acceptable turnaround time are implicitly identified as contributory to shortage and stockouts. Management strategies for stock buildup and constant coordination with the regulatory agencies. And at the facility level, The strong network of suppliers and private and public collaboration and partnership mitigates stockout situation. Shortage and stockout situations have implications to service delivery. Our policy recommendations were crafted through the findings merged with the inputs of our respondents. First, are we recommending a drug shortage notification system? Our answer is not yet, but it is a promising intervention once the preconditions are met. Developed countries with established drug system took many years of policy research, extensive consultation, and supply chain system strengthening prior to the creation of their drug shortage notification system. This leads us to the next set of recommendations. Predictable financial funding flow will improve forecasting practices attuned to economies of scale. With sufficient financial requirements, long-term reforms will not, without sufficient financial requirements, long-term reforms will not materialize. Human and non-human resources should be financed to expand the regulatory capacity of the FDA and the DOH, and this will promote regulatory agility. Second is to complement the increase in purchasing power for drugs and medicines with an agile supply chain system attuned to updated policies fit to the current needs and context. And lastly, evidence-based intervention will only be possible with efficient data and IT systems. However, this will only materialize through transparency, collaboration, communication between the public and private sector. To end, let me summarize our recommendation into three foundational factors. These are predictable and sufficient financing mechanism, agile supply chain system, and real-time and quality data and IT system to inform policy making and operations. Thank you again for the opportunity to share the lessons we learned in exploring the shortage situation in the selected provinces in our country.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Joy, for that very extensive presentation. So before we proceed, we would just like to remind our participants again to fill up the attendance sheet. So I think the secretariat has already posted the link to the attendance sheet, and kindly also key in your questions for the speakers later. Okay, so as emphasized by Ma'am Joy a while ago, so there are really a lot of players in maintaining a stable supply chain, no? So our next speaker naman will be focusing on the roadmap of the local pharmaceutical industry. Dr. Lloyd Balahadja is currently the president of the Philippine Chamber of Pharmaceutical Industry, or PCPI, an industry organization composed of Filipino pharmaceutical manufacturers, traders, distributors, with the mission of enabling the Philippine pharmaceutical industry to lead and the vision of a globally competitive Filipino pharmaceutical industry. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Lloyd Balahadja.
To my colleagues in the Philippine Chamber of Pharmaceutical Industry, PPMA, PHAP, PD Department of DOH headed by Dr. Melissa Guerrero, government policymakers, academia, and to every Filipino who believes the best is yet to come. Filipinos deserve an affordable and quality healthcare. Collectively, we believe that self-sufficiency and enhancing our local capabilities will help us achieve this goal. It is very painful to see that in a fast-growing country such as the Philippines, we are still dependent on other countries to supply us with essential medicines that we need to take care of our people. Our inability to build and become self-sufficient in a vital segment like healthcare and pharmaceuticals has created problems such as poor quality drugs coming from overseas countries, oligopoly if not monopoly of certain drugs, making it expensive in the country, disinterest from both internal and external investors because of the high level of barriers in competition, such as rapidly imposed bioequivalence. The changes faced by the Food and Drug Administration due to the lack of manpower and long-term planning has created irreversible impact on both industry and the common person due to the delays of renewals and initial registrations. Several factories have closed down and new factories are closing down even prior to starting because of these challenges. Truly, without the support of the government, our local companies will always be stunted in growth and will continue to suffer. We will always be too small to enter the global arena and to compete and create value for our government through exports of Filipino-made products. There will be continuous disinterest for investment from foreign countries due to the lack of local policy favoring manufacturing and technology transfer, as what we have seen from other countries which has been successful in this area, like Indonesia. Leadership starts from the top, and it needs to trickle down to every person to follow. Graft and corruption, bureaucracy, needs to be addressed before it eats up the moral fabric on how we, as Filipinos, do our business. Our teachers and students needs more than just reading books and watching presentation to learn and to innovate. They need to be exposed to industry practices and technology to help them dream big and provide value. In the modern era of democratizing education, how can they compete with their fellow students from other countries if there is no longer an industry to support their learning? No more industry that will support modeling and entrepreneurship. Filipinos will help fellow Filipinos. Our roadmap is an outline of the present situation of the pharmaceutical industry and provides recommendations on areas where we should improve so that together we can continuously deliver quality, affordable healthcare to benefit our children and our future Filipino generations. Our roadmap endeavors to consolidate the industry's key challenges and aspiration into an industry roadmap towards achieving a more vibrant pharmaceutical industry. This initiative is spearheaded by the Philippine Chamber of Pharmaceutical Industry Inc. PCPI in partnership with other industry organizations and government agencies. Its primary objective is to advocate for an enabling regulatory environment for the pharmaceutical industry to achieve self-sufficiency and efficiency in serving Filipino consumers' healthcare needs. In the Philippines, as in most pharmaceutical industries elsewhere, the sector is a complex, often deemed opaque, industry comprised of local and multinational players, of manufacturers, traders, distributors, importers, exporters, marketers, testing facility, wholesalers, and retailers and hospitals. The number of players in the Philippines is said to have drastically increased through the years. Such increase, however, does not include drug manufacturers whose number has reduced. Many attributed this decline to some regulatory bottleneck, lack of support to the local industry, and lack of competitiveness of some players in the local industry compared to foreign producers of imported products. Consequently, employment level in drug manufacturing exhibited a downward trend based on industry survey conducted by the Philippine Statistics Authority. In terms of productivity, efficiency, an analysis of the pattern of capacity utilization rate shows that smaller manufacturers have relatively low productivity efficiency and are less competitive than the bigger ones. It is easy to speculate that if such trend persists, this smaller manufacturing establishment would eventually cease to operate or merge with other establishments in order to survive. Analysis of the industry shows that more and more players rely on imported products. Raw materials for drugs are 100% imported. Analysis of drug registration data shows that registered drug units that originated from the Philippines went down by 54% during the last decade. While local manufacturers are diminishing, the distribution wholesale business is flourishing. In fact, the wholesale of drugs and pharmaceutical products is an industry subclass that has one of the highest gross margins, value added, and compensation paid based on 2015 survey-based data. The industry is regulated by the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, an organization that has been transformed from its predecessor, the Bureau of Food and Drug, BFAD, to assume a greater regulatory power over the sector. Unfortunately, it is now beset with significant challenges as manifested by its huge backlog in the drug registration and dissatisfaction of many industry players. As for the market, it is now dominated by the generic products with 76% share, which suggests that, on the average, medicine prices are going down. And that despite the challenges the industry is facing, the market is valued at 173 billion based on the 2016 estimates, where 56.5% is captured by the multinational companies. Prior to the pandemic, the growth of the market is relatively more robust than the country's economic growth, which suggests a huge potential of the sector for generating value for the economy. In terms of export, we are important in achieving more sustainable growth for the Philippine pharmaceutical industry. Trends show that the country has potential for further developing its export capabilities. Given a more enabling regulatory environment for spurring innovation, Philippine pharmaceutical companies are well positioned to harness the benefits of the ASEAN integration because they adhere to very high standards. To maximize its potential, though, the industry must overcome these challenges, namely, number 1, regulatory and policy, number 2, industry cost, and number 3, market access. The regulatory and policy challenges basically refers to FDA's slow process of registration, whether these are initial registration or its renewal, and the lack of transparency in policy making and the sheer absence of industry participation in the decision-making process that determines the policy and guidelines that governs the industry. Industry cost challenge is tied to these regulatory bottlenecks, in the sense that delays in registration imply loss of opportunities for the industry and deprive consumers of timely marketing of products necessary for their healthcare. Furthermore, the costs brought about by the stringent rules and slow processes under the context of a policy regime that seeks to reduce prices of medicine have very serious adverse consequences to the industry. Another problem of equal importance is the lack of manpower, whether in the manufacturing, research and development, or retail sectors. Many industry players that are pushed to survival mode by the above-mentioned challenges have difficulty retaining technical staff. This concern is evident to the regulatory body as well, given greater incentives offered by the private sector and opportunities outside the country. Lastly, the key challenge that the industry is facing is market access. For some unmarketed brands that are unable to penetrate retail stores, the industry relies on the government to provide an enabling environment so there would be greater retail competition. The industry's goal, determined through a visioning exercise by PCPI, are two-pronged. These are, number one, incorporating self-sufficiency and industry development in the mandates of the Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agency and other relevant agency. And number two, effective implementation of existing policy and programs on encouraging innovation and industry development. To achieve its vision and goals, these broad strategies must be concretized. Number one, by enhancement of regulatory process and capability. Number two, development or enhancement of partnership among various stakeholders. And number three, development of competencies needed for production and supply of essential medicine. And lastly, exploring and experimenting with models with other countries that may be relevant and effective to Philippines' case. Despite the challenges the industry faces, there are existing support structures that can be harnessed. For one, there are policies that provide for preference of locally produced products. Unfortunately, the way that these policies are implemented does not seem to have a positive impact on the local industry, at least based on the insight gathered from the industry. Hence, policies must be re-examined and fine-tuned to serve their predefined purpose. Moreover, while the government does not provide grants for R&D, not many industry players participate in these programs, hence suggesting the need to forge alliance among the government agencies such as the Food and Drug Administration, the Department of Health, the Department of Science and Technology, industry, and the academe. It is very crucial that the academe carry out R&D that will create value and that the government invest on not only physical facilities but effective mechanisms for concrete collaboration. Also, the aggressive efforts of the Department of Trade and Industry to boost the manufacturing sector are consistent with industry's clamor for government support for improved competitiveness. All these existing support mechanisms must be capitalized concretely and effectively. Given the numerous challenges the industry is facing, our roadmap proposes the following key recommendation. Number one, improve and streamline process of drug registration. Number two, enhance capacity of the FDA. Number three, ensure participation in transparent policy-making process. Number four, ensure quality and fairness in regulations. Number five, ensure consistent policies. Number six, develop genuine partnership among government, industry, and academe. Lastly, number seven, support local industry. These recommendations are by no means simple, but many of these are doable and may already be in place or currently being implemented, although not perhaps in a magnitude or level that can deliver substantial and visible impact. If some recommendations need to be prioritized for their urgency and importance, these are: number one, gaining policy support for developing local industry and achieving self-sufficiency, because all government-led initiatives depend on it. And number two, the development of genuine partnership among various stakeholders so that these bodies can appropriately arrive at workable solutions for the industry's complex problem. As a final note, we shall be sending copies of our self-sufficiency roadmap to all participants of the Generic Summit Thank you very much for your time and attention and inviting us in this summit. Good day to all.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Balahadia. So our next speaker is the President and Managing Director of MSD in the Philippines and a cardiologist by training. So Dr. Beaver received his medical degree from the University of the Philippines, completing his residency in internal medicine and fellowship in cardiology at the Philippine General Hospital and a research fellowship at the St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri, US. He is widely published in the areas of stress testing, nuclear imaging, structured treatment approaches for diabetes mellitus. So Dr. Beaver is currently serving his sixth term as the president of the Pharmaceutical and Healthcare Association of the Philippines, or PHAP, representing the research-based providers of life-saving medicines and vaccines in the country. So he will be briefly giving us a presentation on how can the research-based pharmaceutical companies promote partnership on technology transfer to LMICs? Dr. Beaver, the floor is yours po.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind invitation for PHAP to speak. Let me try sharing my deck. Can you see it now? Okay. Uh, can you see my deck now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the confirmation. I just wanted to be sure that I wasn't talking to myself. So thank you again for the kind invitation to speak. It's been several years that we've been constantly invited to join this generic summit, and we have been participating in this. All right. Just a word about who we are. Again, as you already heard, we are the research-based organizations. The organization represents them, and PF is a member of the Geneva-based International Federation of Pharmaceutical Industry Associations, or IFPMA, and the Global Self-Care Federation and Coalition for Safe Medicines. Okay. Well, obviously, this pandemic has really upset the world, to put it mildly, right? And we have had to respond definitely to the challenges that the pandemic has brought us. And there have been three main ways that our local association has responded. First and foremost, to fast track the development of safe and effective COVID-19 treatments and vaccines and diagnostics, to implement measures for uninterrupted supply of medicines for both COVID and other conditions, and three, to launch a campaign to protect our healthcare workers and generate funds for their medical needs. And all of this has been this has been a constant challenge also because, as you all know, we all are humans. We all are subject to the potential of catching this virus, and we've all had to work very differently from our usual patterns before. Now, let me first focus on development and safe and effective COVID vaccines and diagnostics. We've been really working hard to really focus our energies in research and development in this particular space, particularly the speeding up the research and development of vaccines. But again, please remember that the work in vaccines has been going on for decades, right? Because vaccines are not easy. But we've already recognized the dangers brought about by coronavirus, which is why even before there has been already work on the different platforms, potential platforms that could be used in development of vaccines. So the speed by which we now see actual vaccines for the COVID-19 come through in just 18 months, basically, all of that does not take into account the years before that people were actually studying the coronavirus. Why did we look into or focus on the spike protein? Why did we focus on this particular aspect? How did we manage to work on these potential enhanced vaccine side effects, right? So all of this work had already been going on because really, industry has recognized the potential for pandemics coming soon. The first SARS pandemic that started over 17 years ago. That was the wake-up call, followed by the MERS, and now the SARS-CoV-2. Common denominator, they're all coronaviruses. So we've been actually looking at these different platforms for over 10 years. So you can see that there's been fantastic development in number of vaccines, and you already see so many that have already finally come through. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many more companies trying to accelerate their own vaccine development. And you can see that the production will probably exceed 12 billion doses this year. 12 billion doses in 2021. Now, the next question is, how do you distribute, right? So this is where now a lot of the collaborations are coming through. How do you ensure that there's enough manufacturing? You've all read the stories about how a major pharma company in the US had to shut down basically one manufacturing facility in Baltimore, which is why we had to do all these collaborations. And these are just some of the collaborations that are ongoing. Because really, at this point in time, we're all trying to ramp up production just to be able to supply the world, right? Fires in plants do not help. And we heard about that happening in India, right? So there are issues that really impact vaccine production. And oftentimes it may not necessarily be something within our control. Hurricanes, typhoons, fires, all of these things play into the issues with regards our supply chain. But rest assured, all these multinational companies that you see here are working hard in collaborating both in the discovery, development, and manufacturing of vaccines. And now, like I said earlier, is how do we ensure that there are equitable distribution of the vaccine? All right. And some of these things include trade barriers, all right, that may impact the rapid entry of vaccines, supporting country readiness, particularly in how to, one, secure supply, and two, deploy the vaccines to the most important or the most vulnerable of the population. And of course, constantly innovating, looking for better ways to enhance the vaccine, finding the right dosage of the vaccines to be used. I think we just heard news about the Pfizer vaccine now potentially being authorized for 5 to 11 years old, but take note, the dose is only a third that given to adults. So there are nuances that always constantly need to be looked at in the vaccines. Even the storage conditions of these already established vaccines, how to ensure that the storage can be not as difficult as what they used to be at the start. Now, shifting gears a little bit, we've been talking about prevention of the illness through vaccination, but we do now understand that this particular illness has two phases. The early phase, which is the viral response phase that you see here on your screen. Let me see if I can pointer. All right. The early phase, where it's mostly the virus, and this is where vaccines would work to try to prevent this. And then the later phase, when you now have the inflammatory response phase. And this is the part that actually kills people. So which is why early days, the focus was really on the severe inpatient needs, finding new treatments or repurposing new treatments once we understood that that was the pathology going on. So which is why you now see all of these interleukin-6 inhibitors, anti-inflammatory agents, the use of steroids to try to address this particular phase of the illness. But now we're trying to find how do we actually get to this part of mild disease before they progress into severe disease. Because it's really critical, right? I mean, like when you're trying to break a pandemic like this, you want to prevent through vaccines, you want to treat outpatients so that you do not overload your hospital healthcare system or your healthcare system, right? So which is why there's so much now in the pipeline looking precisely at trying to treat early illness. We've all heard about the antibody cocktail that's already being developed or actually being authorized in the US, but that requires injections. And do we have the infrastructure to distribute this type of a treatment? Versus now, oral therapy, of which there are multiple examples here. And I'll talk a little bit about my company's candidate, molnupiravir. Now, Results of the studies have shown that from Ridgeback and from Emory University, where we licensed this particular compound from, we found that this particular molecule, molnupiravir, inserts itself into the viral RNA, replacing actually the RNA polymerase subtly, very one or two spots lang na hindi napapansin tuloy ng virus. So it's now able to induce catastrophic replication. So there's actually viral catastrophe. Because when the changes happen in this polymerase, when the virus replicates, it actually replicates a non-virus or something that doesn't work. So this mechanism suggests development of resistance is unlikely. And now the phase 2 study participants, show that within 5 days, nawawala yung virus. And at the same time, it seems to be able to deal with all the different variants to date. Currently, it's in phase 3, and we're actually also looking at viral genotyping just to further understand whether the different strains or variants, sorry, the word should be variants, are actually still being handled properly by molnupiravir. And so far, so good. We're seeing that it works in the different variants, and it continues to work within 5 days. So really, that's what we're seeing with zero viral distribution or viral expectoration already after the end of 5 days. So we are looking at the potential to reduce progression of illness and hospitalization, as I already discussed earlier, which is what we'd like to do in this continuum. And the Philippines is participating in at least three, actually, there should be 3 different molnupiravir trials just to prove the point. And hopefully we can get the emergency use authorization from the US very soon, at least within the year. But to the theme of today's conversation, how do we ensure that that particular innovation actually gets to our country? Companies have actually been signing voluntary license deals with Merck or MSD. Over 8 companies have already signed up, and 7 are based in India, 1 is based abroad, outside of India. And we're still working on other deals, potentially the medicines patents pool, so that further companies can actually start getting the license to actually manufacture, right? This will improve access to the product. It will improve supply also, because you now have at least 8 companies manufacturing the tablet. The likely thing, of course, is to ensure constantly the quality. That's always a concern of any multinational before we license out. Will the quality be maintained? Now, fortunately, this is not as a complicated a product as a remdesivir to manufacture. So hopefully the quality is retained, but we do need them to contractually demonstrate that. The likely regulatory route is potentially compassionate special permits. Already we know that some of our licensees are already exploring, talking, or at least chatting with the FDA about this. All right. And again, we need this to be included in treatment algorithms. So hopefully our local specialists can figure out where in the treatment pathways they will include it. And now get early treatment for at least 5 days. And potential channels of distribution may include the following. All right, so it's already happening. We are not keeping the drug exclusively to MSD. It's actually gone out to multiple companies. That's one way to probably improve and distribute innovative treatments such as ours to LMIC countries such as ours. On the horizon, you can see this whole list of other drugs still coming through the pipeline. Atea Pharmaceuticals working with Roche. The Pfizer compound is also hot on our heels. So yes, there will be multiple compounds potentially coming in the country very, very soon. Now, earlier there was a conversation about stock out situations. Yes, it is a constant issue for all of us. And it really challenges us also internally in pharma companies as to how to forecast. Yes, forecasting is that there's a bit of a intuition and a bit of science, but we now have to really change the way we forecast rather than just relying on past 3 months, past 6 months, and then projecting a trend. We now have to take a look at the complications induced by the surge. These surges do not help in terms of our supply chain. So definitely we are constantly looking at manufacturing capacity and making sure they are at optimal levels. We have kept all our manufacturing plants open, even at the hotbed of Wuhan. Yes, we were manufacturing even then. We were distributing out of there, even at the height of the pandemic in their particular area. The Philippines is a priority country for many multinationals because really, I mean, like with such a large population, we are now in the top 20 of the world in terms of the worst impact of the pandemic. Obviously, we do get a lot of attention from our principals internationally. But there have been great difficulties in truth in getting chartered planes, bringing in the Philippines does not have a cargo plane industry. It's really all the cargo here distributed is on passenger planes. So when the passenger flights got knocked out, sorry, there was no flights to Visayas Mindanao. Industry had to charter flights. We had to charter flights on our own. And we did not pass on those costs to the pharmacies. Right? Now, do we dominate the Philippine industry, the pharmaceutical industry? No, I'm sorry. This chart from IQVIA already shows that even as early as, oh my gosh, what year is this? 2009. Even as early as 2009, generics dominates the industry. The counting units, the tablets, the boxes that move out the drugstore is dominated heavily by generic companies. And as this data ends in 2018, you can see that it's 76% of all units sold at the drugstore are generics. And that is really the role of generics anyway. The innovator companies, we will constantly strive to find new treatments while our old drugs go off patent and become generic. So, as a partner to improving access, innovation, and collaboration, yes, we talked about tech transfer. That's something that people would love. But there are really two types of tech transfers, technology transfers. First is, of course, manufacturing, the know-how, which includes physical material, equipment, factories, all right? Voluntary licensing is a valuable tool, as I already mentioned earlier. Then there's the other part about scientific collaboration and knowledge sharing. Collaboration in scientific fields, research and development, participation in clinical trials, which we are already doing and participating in, and transfer of scientific skills and trial know-how. And then there are all these checklists for technologies for pharmaceuticals and how we can actually ensure that we can actually move some of this knowledge over to the country. But it really also requires, it's always a two-way street, right? There has to be government policies in place that are really forward-looking for at least 25 to 50 years, because you're not going to build a factory for just 5 years, right? Your horizon's so much longer than just 5 years. So which is why we do need an enabling environment to be able to retain and attract research-driven pharmaceutical companies into the country. And you can see all of this list of companies that have a lot of work done when it comes to this COVID pandemic, not present in the country. We need that kind of environment, as I mentioned earlier, to be able to attract these companies here. An environment that recognizes the value of and builds capabilities for advancing sciences, technology, and innovation. And as I said, this really requires a 25 to 50-year horizon in terms of planning. If you have a very vibrant local clinical trial sector, definitely we provide opportunities for early access, generate local evidence, provide evidence-based practice, all right? And clinical trials and practitioners are very, very high level quality. We train them up. Our country definitely has all of this potential because of the site capabilities, the type of epidemiology that we do have here, the English-speaking staff, and we do have regulatory and ethical approval processes in place. Finally, research-based companies as an industry partner, we innovate and collaborate. So the main issues or the main things that we have learned from this pandemic, fiscal support and incentives do help, particularly like big major companies like Moderna. They needed federal government support from the US. We needed regulatory agility and flexibility. So we thank our local FDA for the speed by which they treat and look at this pandemic type treatments. And we do need a collaborative intellectual property environment. the ability to work through voluntary licensing as a preferred tool to be able to bring in products into the country. And in fact, some of these voluntary licensees will not be paying royalties, all right, based on the contracts that we actually sign off on, all right, just so that we can bring in the products at the cheapest possible cost. And may I remind you, remdesivir is a very good example of how competition among these voluntary license companies brings down the price from over 105,000 pesos a year ago. Now, if anybody cares to know, it's 6,000 pesos for a full course of treatment of 5 days. Competition works to bring down prices. All right. So with that, let me thank everybody for the time. And remember that the innovation that my companies that I represent bring to the game become your pipeline in the generics for the future. So you really need us to succeed so that you will be successful also. Thank you.
Thank you very much po, Dr. Beaver. I think the two speakers a while ago, Dr. Beaver and Dr. Balahadja, really emphasized on the pharmaceutical industry's efforts to sustain and improve pharmaceutical reliance in the country. So now I think it's time naman to hear the perspective of healthcare providers on managing and stabilizing drug supplies. So we are proud to introduce our next speaker, Miss Hilda Cebuasalhay. So just to give a brief introduction, she was the president of the Philippine Pharmacists Association, Davao City chapter. Her accomplishments include, so we reorganized, structured the PPHA Davao City chapter, which was awarded the best chapter in Mindanao in 2016, the best chapter for consecutive years, besting other chapters all over the country. She also pioneered the Pharma Roadshow project. It is a drug information project on AMR awareness to the different barangays in Davao City. So this was then adopted and expanded all over the country through the national PPHA and received a Silver Anvil Award last 2019. So she also graduated with honors from the University of Immaculate Conception and took a master's degree in pharmacy from the same university back in 2012. And she has worked in the academe, practice hospital pharmacy, and worked in the community and regulatory setting. As an entrepreneur herself, she started a business, drug distribution, Assigner Drug Pharmaceuticals, and she has also presented studies like the pharmacy aid study in Davao City, as a poster abstract for social and administrative pharmacy during the 11th Asian Conference on Clinical Pharmacy. So Ms. Salhay has also been appointed as the Regional Lead Assessor for Test the Pharmacy Services, NC3, for Pharmacy Assistants in Region 11. She has been a member of the Board of Trustees, PPHA Speakers Bureau, the chairperson of the Membership Committee of PPHA, and the overall chairperson of the 2019 PPHA National Convention, which was graced by more than 4,300 delegates in SMX Convention Center City. She was recently elected as the president of PPHA and is the first PPHA president to come from Mindanao. So with the promise of leading the pharmacists of the Philippines into the new century of pharmacy practice, Ms. Gigi aims to advocate for better pharmacy practice and community service in the country. So Ma'am Gigi, the floor is yours po.
Hi, good morning. Good morning to all of you, to our different government agencies, stakeholders, and fellow pharmacists. So good morning po. Okay, so I would like to thank you for the very generous introduction. And also, I would like to thank now the Department of Health for the pleasure to, it's really my pleasure to present to you the efforts of pharmacy in collaboration with other areas of practice for their inputs and the ongoing studies that they have from our different sectors in the pharmacy practice. So I would also like to um, commend and recognize also the efforts of the different speakers this morning and for the inputs, the recommendations, and perspectives to really, address the drug shortage in the country, because truly this is going to be an end-to-end approach now that we need. This is a multi-sectoral and collaborative approach that this country needs in order for us to achieve equity and universal health care. So I don't know if you can already.
Not yet po, ma'am.
Not yet. Okay.
We're not yet seeing the screen. Ayan.
This
We're
one.
seeing it right now. Yes, ma'am.
Is it
Thank
okay
you.
now?
Yes, ma'am. Okay na po.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So again, I will be presenting to you the efforts of pharmacists to stabilize the supply of drugs during health emergencies, so particularly this time during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this is a healthcare provider's perspective or the pharmacy perspective. So we always believe, no, that access to medicines is access to better health. And during this unprecedented time, the global drug supply could severely get impacted by this pandemic, and the results of this shortage could be really catastrophic, no, and may last for with no extended period, and primarily due to the global economic disruption and at unprecedented speed and scale. So pharmacists must really step up so that safe and effective and the rational use of drugs be delivered even during these health emergencies. And we look into this medicine shortage during this pandemic with four focus areas now at our end. Well, definitely the sharings, the inputs that our previous speakers, of course, siguro madadaanan ko din sila no later on, but in very briefly. But I'll just be sharing to you yung pinaka-focus areas in our perspective lang, no? Kasi wala pa po tayong mga, let's say, talagang definite recommendation na apply no as of this time in other in a deeper context. But let me share to you the four focus areas that we look into to address no the medicine shortage in the country. So first we have to look into the types of medicines being affected. So I know that we don't have really yet no a very good database or reporting or notification system, but we have somehow been good having good communication with the rest of the different sectors, now from the industry down to the pharmacy in the community and in the hospital. So next also is we look into the factors contributing to the medicine shortage. No, we have to look into the demand and the supply, because demand and supply have an important relationship, because yes, together they determine the prices, the quantities, okay, the quality of most goods and services available in the given market. And third, we have to look into the different roles, no, that our pharmacists from the different practice areas could be able to contribute, no, to this problem. So from industry, regulatory, hospital, and community. Okay, so this is going to be really a collaborative um, effort, no, for all the pharmacies in the different sectors. And lastly, recommendations. Recommendations must be readily available, and we have to discuss now, and as we discuss the bottlenecks and the reasons for the shortages, pharmacists in the different sector need to consider the existing solutions and identify the different approaches, the strategic plan for preventing and mitigating the drug shortage in the country. And I would like to focus now on the roles of pharmacies in the different no, sectors. So let me start from the pharmacies in the industry. And because various sectors such as trade restrictions, strict registration, no, as mentioned by previous speakers before, and regulatory compliance may result in drug shortages. So we need to really work in the industry, or pharmacists must work in the industries are um, we know that they are aware, no, of the significance of timely distribution of medicines to patients, particularly life-saving and essential drugs during the current emergency circumstances. So industrial pharmacists must be fully prepared and should develop a contingency plan to avoid or at least minimize shortages of drug supply. So pharmacists in the industry have a very, very crucial role in addressing medicine shortage. So first and foremost, we have to look into the production part. No? So the pharmacists in the industry should make sure that there is uninterrupted production. Uninterrupted production means, you have to really continue your work, in the fields, researchers and even regulatory authorities have been doing their work even during lockdowns, quarantines, as they continue to work at manufacturing plants also. So other companies even house their employees, and not to alter the workflow, no, even during this pandemic. And number two, the regulatory affairs. So both the regulators or regulatory agencies and the ones being regulated, no, the different companies, we have to fast track, as being recommended, no, before by previous speaker, fast track the processing. Otherwise, no drugs should be made available, no, in the market. And during these unprecedented times, industrial pharmacists need to adopt proactive and active measures to fulfill the legal requirements of production and supply. And since regulatory authorities in many countries, now if we have to compare, they provide already legal flexibilities, and I hope that we are doing the same here in our country. And pharmacies should ensure that drug supply should not be disruptive merely due to legal procedures. And third, we should look into uh, to have a diverse supply network. We have to have an alternative, or alternative suppliers should be dapat i-work out po natin, and alternative supplies as well, like raw materials, packaging materials, and others, no? So manufacturers that rely on stocks, for example, from India or from China alone, where the COVID outbreak began. So it's where India sources majority of its ingredients. So we may face really a very bad drug supply, no, or drug supply constraints due to the global situation. And lastly, the supply chain. No, for the supply chain, pharmacies at the supply chain, from the manufacturing or production side up to distribution, wholesaling, and down to the community and hospital level. So we really are looking into the this fourth one, also the supply chain. And we always look at the pharmacies in the industry as the invisible frontliners also, because any delay, no, from their part, it's going to be a domino effect, no. So kaya po mahalaga ang mga pharmacies po in the industry. And looking now at the roles of pharmacists, no, to address the drug supply shortage in the community settings, community pharmacy has a very unique, credible role, to act with ease in accessibility. And there seems to be an even greater dependence on pharmacists as the first point of contact to fulfill the public's healthcare needs. And pharmacies are one of the few places that are kept open for public service even during the strict lockdowns. So there seems to be really a dependence on the pharmacies at the first point of contact. And pharmacies around the world are one of the few places that are really open. And so because of that, we have to look into uh, having this immediate identification of potential drugs or possible drugs for shortage during this pandemic. And second is provision of potential alternative drugs or medicines, let's say generics or therapeutic equivalents, no? With, of course, good communication and collaboration with our uh, prescription, with the doctors, no, giving the prescriptions. Okay. And in addressing the medicine shortage in the community level, we look into how we do the potential drug listing, because as of now, we have to admit now that we really don't have that national notification system list. No? But as of the moment, we are having collaborative and a good communication from end to end, no? So sa lahat ng mga sektor, nag-uusap po ano na yung mga shortage na, and then pinag-uusapan what should be the drugs to be included in the list. And so first we look into this, and we include emergency drugs, those drugs that yung sa expected na emergency, for example, itong pandemic na ito, ano bang kailangan natin? And emergencies also na mga unexpected like typhoons and all of this, so should be included also. And second, the common ailments, drugs for common ailments, like cough, colds, and all of these antibiotics, no? And off-label drugs as well. And we should not forget the mental health drugs, no, during this time of crisis. So that we are looking into creating also the emergency like pharmacist, no, group, no, to address situations like this. So that's what we are looking into here in our organization in PPHA. And next group, let's look at the pharmacist in the hospital. So how do they address situations like this for to mitigate drug shortage? First, to establish drug supply schemes based on treatment guidelines. And second, a provision of potential alternative drugs or medicines like the one that I have shared to you with the community pharmacists, no, the generic alternatives, therapeutic equivalents. And it's also important to have an online drug procurement, no, in the hospital level. Okay, for our recommendations way forward, this is very brief, no? I think it has been discussed very well by other speakers a while ago. But since I said that this is going to be collaborative, really a multi-sectoral approach, no, to address the situation. So parang nagkakatugma din po yung mga recommendations natin. So first, we're looking into the regulation, as I have mentioned, na dapat hindi po magkaroon ng delay on the regulatory affairs and all of this, no, para hindi po magkaroon ng domino effect, no, shortage up to the local or community level. And there must be a national reporting system that must be implemented, because this pandemic, we don't know when will this end, and we have to be ready, no, for other bigger problems in the future on drug shortages. And as you have noticed, because of the different variants and all this, other diseases also popped up now in the different levels on the hospitals. Now, so it's very hard to address this if you don't have the national reporting system. And next is a risk-based public health approach also. Then the procurement system should be well implemented. We have to look into the supply chain management system and effective stakeholders discussion, no? Because as I said, there should always be collaboration with other stakeholders to address this. We cannot do this alone. Okay, we really have to have an end-to-end approach of this to achieve universal health care. And we should also look into the global notification system for us to have a clear picture of what's happening, no, globally, because definitely all the countries, no, because this is a global crisis, so we will always be affected, no, whatever is happening in the global level. And ethical medicines use should be addressed also at this point in time. This, no, medyo mahaba-haba ang discussion when you talk about ethical medicines use, but this could also be one factor that would result to drug shortage, okay, if we will not address this issue. And as well as the pricing of drugs should also be addressed, because as we have seen, no, in the news, there are a lot of overpricing and a lot of even misinformation about the certain drugs. No, marami po mga abuses on pricing. So in summary, it must be noted that drug shortage could lead to serious consequences when it comes to patient outcomes. And pharmacists can play an important role in the mitigation of emerging drug shortages related to this pandemic. And pharmacies should aim at procuring and stocking the right amount of medicines to guarantee the supply in whatever field you are, even in the community level or in the hospital area. Drug demand analysis to identify medications of interest should also be conducted in parallel manner. And the regulatory body of pharmacy and pharmacy in the industry should work very well in collaboration and devise a shortage and mitigation plan beforehand. And pharmacists really can play an important role again in the mitigation of emerging drug shortage related to the pandemic. And we at the PPHA, or the Philippine Pharmacists Association, would always welcome and ready to help all the stakeholders. We should join and collaborate with each other to address this concern. And again, we, as I said, because access to medicines is very important to achieve universal health. So it is always the pharmacists, as we say, we are drug experts, pero dapat we have to really look into the different factors in order for us to provide safe, effective, and quality medicines to our patients, especially during this pandemic. So thank you so much for this time, and I hope that everyone are safe, and I'm looking forward to more collaboration with you to address this problem in this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much po, Ma'am Gigi. So yes, we agree po that one of the health facilities that remained open during this pandemic were the pharmacies, and the pharmacists continue to provide access to medicines and access to affordable and available medicines even during the time of the pandemic. So we also want to greet the Philippine Pharmacists Association. Happy World Pharmacist Day. So this month, they are also celebrating their World Pharmacist Day. So sana po mapalakpakan po natin ang ating mga healthcare workers, ang ating mga pharmacists na nagtatrabaho kahit na sa gitna ng pandemya po. Okay, so we would like to remind everyone again to key in your questions in the Q&A, or you can simply message it in the chat box. And we also want to remind that we have also posted the attendance sheet here in the chat box. So kindly fill it up na lang so that we can note your attendance to this webinar. So now that we've heard the perspectives of the healthcare providers, so our next speaker is a renowned tax lawyer from the Third World Network Agap Coalition. He is an alumnus of the Ateneo de Manila University Law School. After becoming a member of the Philippine Bar, he proceeded to study in the State University of New York, focusing on government and NGO accounting. He then obtained a Master's of Law degree at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign College of Law. Currently, his work focuses on tax, international trade, and the right to health. And he is also the Third World Network representative to Tax and Fiscal Justice Asia. To share with us consumer perspectives on TRIPS, flexibility, and patent waivers during times of emergency, let us all welcome to the virtual floor Attorney Antonio or Tony Salvador po. Attorney, the floor is yours po.
Sorry. Maraming salamat, Alex, sa magandang generous introduction. So, allow me to share my screen. Maliwanag po ba yung boses ko? Hindi masyadong mahina o hindi masyadong malakas?
Yes, sir. We can hear you po.
Okay, sige. Pisang ko lang. Okay. So, salamat ulit sa pag-imbita. Salamat sa DOH. Gusto ko sanang i-share yung advocacy namin patungkol dun sa TRIPS waiver. So, in the course of around, less than 15 minutes, so susubukan kong paliwanag kung bakit mahalaga na ang Pilipinas ay sumama sa ibang bansa para ma-waive muna yung mga patents at saka mga iba pang mga intellectual property patungkol lamang sa COVID-19, no? So hindi naman to hindi ibig sabihin na sisirain na natin yung legal framework para sa intellectual property ng Pilipinas o ng ibang mundo. Ng ibang bansa, I should say. So siguro mag-umpisa tayo dun sa WTO Agreement on Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights. So the Philippines is actually one of the founding members of the WTO way back in 1995. And one of the agreements in the WTO, aside from trade in services, trade in goods, is what's called Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights, or TRIPS. Basically, it says all members must have in place their respective legal framework that protects intellectual property, patents, copyright, etc., etc. So according to the WTO, in respect of each of the main areas of IP covered by the TRIPS agreement, the agreement sets out the minimum standards of protection to be provided by each member. And to be fair to the Philippines, I think we are definitely compliant. No? So ano yung consequence pag hindi ka compliant? So pwede ka mapatawan ng trade sanctions ng ibang trading partners ng Philippines. Sa ngayon, I think we have 164 WTO members. So basically all of the countries that you can think of are members. So dito yung pumapasok yung problema kasi hindi enough yung mga vaccines na napoproduce worldwide at apparently nako-corner siya for some reason, nako-corner siya ng mga rich countries. In fact, nung umpisa ng production ng vaccine, binili na nila yung, I think 80% or something. Siyempre, kailangan i-ramp up yung production ng vaccine, pero isa sa mga, one of the problems is intellectual property protection. So, I mean, you cannot just use the patents, industrial designs, etc., to produce vaccines or other medical implements. You have to obtain their approval, their permission, be it through compulsory licensing, i.e. through the government, or voluntary licensing, basically granted by the pharmaceutical company. So given this problem, a solution was proposed by India and South Africa. So this was in way back last year, no? October 2020. So they wanted a waiver from certain provisions of the TRIPS agreement for the prevention, containment, and treatment of COVID-19. So it says here in their communication, IP-C/W/669, it's important for members to work together to ensure that intellectual property rights such as patents, industrial designs, do not create barriers to timely access to affordable medical products, including vaccines and medicines, or to scaling up of research, development, manufacturing, and supply of medical products, essential to combat COVID-19. So basically what these two countries are trying to do is to convince what's called the TRIPS Council in the WTO to in turn convince the General Council, meaning all of the members of the WTO, to waive for the meantime, only during the pandemic, sections 1, 4, 5, and 7 of Part 2 of the TRIPS Agreement in relation particularly solely to COVID-19. And this waiver is supposedly only for a short-term period, while the pandemic still lasts. It was originally proposed by India and South Africa, but the waiver proposal is now supported by co-sponsoring, 63 co-sponsoring governments, with around a total of 100 countries supporting the proposal overall. It has gained worldwide support by hundreds of civil society organizations, academics, scientists, medical associations, trade unions, United Nations agencies, including the WHO and UNAIDS. So UNAIDS is the United Nations Program for HIV/AIDS. And recently, more than 100 IP lawyers and academics published a letter in support of the TRIPS waiver. By the way, it's also supported by the Vatican, i.e. the Pope. The proposal has since been co-sponsored by delegations of Kenya, Eswatini, Mozambique, Pakistan, Bolivia, Venezuela, Mongolia, Zimbabwe, Egypt, the African Group, the Least Developed Countries Group, the Maldives, Fiji, Namibia, Vanuatu, Indonesia, our neighbor, and Jordan. So what's the legal basis for this waiver? So it's actually paragraphs 1, 3, and 4 of Article 9 of the WTO agreement on TRIPS. So the scope is actually limited. Section 1 on copyright, Section 5 on Section 4 on industrial designs, Section 5 on patents, etc., etc., and only for the protection of COVID-19. So it's not as if we are going to throw all of the important laws on intellectual property. As I mentioned earlier on, it's only for a limited duration. What we also need to emphasize is that even if this waiver passes through the WTO, the countries need not actually put aside their intellectual property laws. It's just a policy tool that they can avail of. So if for example, the Philippines says, well, we don't need the waiver, although it has been approved by the WTO, then we can just continue enforcing our intellectual property code for medicines, for drugs, etc., etc. So it's not automatic that we get rid of all of the laws on intellectual property once this waiver is approved. It's very interesting because yesterday there's this, I think, banner headline at the New York Times. It says here, pressure grows on US companies to share COVID vaccine technology. So there's a need really to share the technology and so that other companies can ramp up their production. Often it is argued that intellectual property like patents should be protected because companies actually expended a lot of money in terms of research and development, in terms of personnel, etc., etc., to come up with patents, no? To come up with inventions that are eventually patented. But at the same time, it's also a fact that many of the companies actually receive subsidies from the government. So, for example, Moderna accepted $2.5 billion in taxpayer money to develop its COVID-19 vaccine. BioNTech / Pfizer actually received from the German government 400 million euros. So this headline was only yesterday. With the headline, curiously, is a picture from the Philippines. It says here, people in Manila awaiting the Moderna vaccine. So the company said it would license the IP for its COVID vaccine to others. Unfortunately, but only after the pandemic ends. So aside from us in civil society, there are also legislators who actually support the TRIPS waiver. So for example, at the Senate, last September 8, 2021, Senator Coco Pimentel, chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, asked the Senate to consider Foreign Affairs Committee Report 274 and proposed Senate Resolution 560 filed by Senator Risa Ontiveros, asking the Philippines, our government, to support the TRIPS waiver of the WTO. Senator Pimentel sponsors Resolution 274, urging the Executive Department through the DFA to support the proposal of India, South Africa for the WTO to suspend the implementation, application, and enforcement of the relevant provisions of the TRIPS agreement. Again, only for COVID-19. So I just want to show you here the proposed Senate resolution filed by Risa Ontiveros. You will note that the communication from India and South Africa was dated October 2, 2020, almost immediately October 28, 2020. Senator Risa Ontiveros filed this proposed Senate resolution. So allow me to just read the some portions of the sponsorship speech of Senator Risa Ontiveros. And she quotes the WHO Director General, who said, "I need to be blunt. The world is on the brink of a catastrophic moral failure, and the price of this failure will be paid with the lives and livelihoods in the world's poorest countries." So she mentioned, in view of this, Mr. President, it is an urgent imperative for the Philippines to support the call of India and South Africa to waive specific provisions of the TRIPS agreement. This proposal calls on the WTO to recognize that countries have the option, only the option, to suspend implementation and enforcement of relevant IP obligations for the purpose of containing COVID-19. So allow me to share the thoughts of Doctors Without Borders, MSF. And this was released July 26, 2021 in Geneva before the WTO meeting. As countries prepare for the WTO General Council meeting, Doctors Without Borders urged the European Union, Norway, UK, and Switzerland to stop stalling the landmark proposal to waive the IP on life-saving COVID-19 medical tools at the WTO. They also asked these countries to join forces with more than 100 countries supporting the waiver by openly engaging in formal negotiations. So apparently, they are trying to stall the negotiations. I think among those other countries who are opposed to the waiver are Japan and South Korea. Yesterday, there was a statement from the White House, from President Biden. So the White House basically support a COVID TRIPS waiver. He says extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. The U.S. supports a waiver of IP protections in the WTO TRIPS agreement for COVID-19 vaccines in the service of ending this pandemic. Maraming salamat po. Yun lang po yung gusto naming ibahagi. Basically, civil society supports the waiver, and we are hoping that the Philippine government should also indicate through our ambassador at the WTO, Ambassador Tihanki, that the Philippines actually supports the waiver, the TRIPS waiver at the WTO. And maybe I can just show you the communications fact sheet from the White House. So this is, I guess this is the official website of the White House. And as you will notice, somewhere here is the language. Specifically, this one says here support for COVID-19 TRIPS waiver. So that's it for us. Thank you very much again for having us, Third World Network and AGAP. Ayos na gamot sa abot-kayang presyo. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much po, Attorney Salvador, for sharing with us the consumer perspective on the TRIPS flexibility and patent waivers. So our next speaker, it would also be sharing with us a consumer perspective ulit. So our next speaker, he has been promoting the use of generics since 1998 as his personal advocacy, bringing the prices of quality generic medicines in the Philippines affordable and accessible to the masses. He lobbied for the amendments of the 1988 Generics Law into the Universal Cheaper Medicines Act of 2008. He has a combined experience of more than 30 years in health, both in the private and government sector, giving him a deep institutional knowledge on the healthcare industry in the Philippines. He was also invited as resource person and participated in local and international conferences. He founded the Philippine Coalition of Consumer Welfare, or PCCWI, in May 2017 in preparation in time for the ASEAN Summit. He principally funded, along with voluntary donations from trustees, members, and from people with shared advocacies, the PCCWI. And he continues to lobby not only in the legislative but up to the executive division of the government to further reduce prices of medicines through Executive Orders 118 in 2009 and EO 104 in February 2020. So let us all welcome Mr. Rick Samaniego. Sir Rick, the floor is yours po. Sir, you're muted po. We cannot hear you.
Cannot hear you.
Everyone, can you hear me clearly this time?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry, I'm mobile and I cannot get through with my laptop at this time. Medyo hiniram ko lang at, I have attended to just a wake of my mother-in-law, and one of my bayaw is in serious condition right now, intubated. Thanks God that, I was able to secure the aftershock vaccine right now, the tulisumab, no, with friends. So bear with me if in my presentation medyo konting magulo. And well, first of all, distinguished guests and participant of this seminar, I hope that I can contribute in my own little way with regards to my experience in generics, no? And since 1998, because I was connected before with the leading Filipino pharmaceutical company in the Philippines, and I was there for 15 years. And within our company, just to tell you a brief background, we have practically 9 divisions, and we're the first to introduce generics. No, so within the company, we have 4 similar brands, for instance, of amoxicillin, and we have a generics. The price of this similar brand like amoxicillin is about 12 pesos at the time, and we have a 3 pesos of the counterpart part of the generics within the company. So I handled 9 division as chairman of a technical coordinating committee, and I was able to examine our price. And why we are number one? Well, because our price is much affordable compared to competitors, no, at the time. So I examined it, and in spite of the fact that ours is much economical, I should say, not cheaper than other multinational companies, that well, because we have our own manufacturing plant in the Philippines. We have these raw materials that we import. So our advertisement in the OTC is high compared to the ethical brand that we promote to the members, practically members of the allied professions. No, and when I examine all this price and examine the price abroad, for instance, in India, in Japan, in Malaysia, our price is still about 8 times or 9 times higher, especially with the branded ones. No, so staying there for 15 years and knowing very well that in my own capacity, personal advocate, I can help the Filipinos. So well, I resigned, okay, and worked with an industrial company, a multinational industrial company. At the same time, pursue my advocacy, personal advocacy of the generics drugs, And because the generic law, the historic generic law was implemented in 1988, which is one of the best laws so far during the time of President Cory Aquino, and Alran Benson was the secretary of DOH at that time. I noticed personally that the promotions is not that effective in terms of level of awareness of the Filipinos. They didn't know that if they patronize such drug during the time, well, they'll be getting a huge savings. Okay, in 2008, I was first invited in the Generic Summit by Secretary Pingoy Duque. Nagkasama po kami niyan sa term ni Presidente Gloria Arroyo. And appointed din siya. And talaga pong pinupush namin yan. And now, 2021 is about 13 years already that we have these generics, and 33 years from the landmark decision, historic 1988 law of generics na na-impose. So as we heard all speakers, yesterday and today, I'm happy to note that they are really doing something to make sure that the availability of the supply. And we also quoted one of our good friends, si FDA Secretary Eric Domingo, na kasi this is part na ang FDA is the ones who champion this cause in making sure that the public awareness as far as generics is concerned and brand is the same. But he admitted that hindi pa masyadong successful kasi walang masyadong nagko-complain, number one. Then number two, nag-iimbita siya sa mga stakeholders. Ang ganda po noon, yung kapihan, okay, para matalakay ito sa lahat ng stakeholders. So, to cut the long story short, what happened sa atin, 33 years na of this. So, ganun pa rin ho yung level of awareness. So, going back, naglabi po ako sa lahat ng NGO. I participated in different civil society just to advance my cause. Okay? Civil society like Kongreso ng Mamamayang Pilipino, halos lahat niyan, League of Corporate Foundation, and the likes. And napansin po ako sa legislation. Okay, so sabi ko maganda ito. So naimbita po ako sa Kongreso para po magsalita at sinabi ko po, pinesend ko lahat ng data. And then, again, ang problem is yung budget. Now sa budget, nalagyan naman kasi yearly po, kami po naiimbita sa General Appropriation Acts at sinisiguro ko na maayos naman po ang pondo ng health. Now, ano ba yung napagtulungan namin nung nandun ako? Number one, yung sa UHC. Number two, amendments of the generic law. Hindi ko kasi alam kung do we have slides. Can we present the slide, please? Saan na ba yun? Yes. Okay. No, mamaya. Okay, sige. Yes. Well, fast forward from 1998, with my personal advocacy, nasabi ng mga legislator na, Rick Samaniego, why don't you establish your own NGO and foundation? And during that time, pag magpalista ka sa SEC, okay, medyo delikado because of what happened to Napoles. But since magkakaroon ng ASEAN Summit, and kailangan nandun din ako, okay, I registered this Philippine Coalition of Consumer Welfare, PCCWI for short, an independent voluntary non-profit corporation. And you know what? It just took me 2 days, okay, in spite of talagang hindi pwede sa SEC muna, no? I'm sorry, na magkaroon ng ma-register because of that what happened. In 2 days, na-registered ko. And because the director of the SEC, parang nakita niya yung talagang burning desire ko na maka-attend ng ASEAN Summit. So in records time, the lawyers would bear from me and other businessmen, hindi po kayo makapag-rehistro sa SEC. And I thank SEC for that. Next slide, please. Yeah. Ang end goal of PCCWI is for the general welfare and benefits of the consumers. No? And my focus is on health. Okay, sa health ko, natap ako ng no. Yes, kasi na-discuss na yata ito, the slides, yung frequently asked question. Yeah, the generics, no. I'm sure you are aware of the generics law, 6675 and the 1988 and its amendments, no. Yung sa amin ni Maring 2008, okay, and also universal healthcare. I also helped in that regard, no, when I was at the Philippine International Trading Corporation, President and CEO consultant, and also the National Commission on Senior Citizen. Yan po, napirmahan po ni Presidente yan. Sabay-sabay sila ng malasakit na nakipagtan po sa atin si Senator Bongo. And then bayanihan, hindi bayanihan, no? Malasakit, yes, which is very useful at this time and age. And then number 3 is yung National Prevention for Control ng Cancer. Kasama din po tayo doon sa oversight. And the Bayanihan to Heal Us Act 1. ito rin po, napasa namin ito with Senator Bongo and the senators for just a period of 4 to 5 months. Okay, so lahat po nakakalat na ang malasakit nationwide. Now, ang isa pong landmark decision na masasabi ko na shortcut, okay, na pinagtulungan din po natin ng DOH, yung pag-issue ng Executive Order 104. Now, with this, it further reduced the prices of medicines, no? And 58 to 70%, in my own experience, actually, nung time po namin ni Presidente Gloria, mas nahirapan ho kami na papirmahan yung Executive Order 421. Yun yung first before this. But kay Presidente Duterte po, it took us, what, 2019 or when it was 2020. So it took us several years. Kaya Presidente ho, bago matapos po yung term niya, nakapaglabas po. No? And this further reduced the prices of medicine. Makwento ko lang, yung misis ko po ng hospital sa sa St. Luke's, nilabas ko noong June for 2 months. Our bill is really staggering. And ngayon, binigyan siya ng reseta. Because of that Executive Order 104, yung pong budget namin weekly, 2 pong insulin na injectable, I'm sure you know that usually cost yung dalawa, yung Apidra at the others, is about, say, 4,000. Ngayon po, halos 1,700 lang per week. Okay? Yung budget ko po na 25,000, na-reduce po for about 12,000 din. No? So, you can just imagine the huge savings of our people. Ako na, for that matter, bigas and the like. So, yan po yung so far ang tinatrabaho natin sa Philippine Coalition of Consumer Welfare. And admittedly, on the part of those stakeholders na kasama ko, medyo bumitaw na ho. We have a nationwide volunteer, and some of them are in the academy, some of them are holding positions in government. And not only that, even President Duterte, isa po sa pinakapanalo ni Presidente na pinus namin yung sinabi niyang ayokong pahirapan po ang tao. Yung pong ease of doing business. Now, in wrap lang, kasi ginagawa naman po natin ito, yung efforts talaga ng consumer with regards to the promotion. Right now, pandemic, ang ginagawa po natin is yung sa social media. Okay, meron tayong Viper, Messenger, all apps. And it started with our family, di ba? Relatives, friends, religious, parish, civil society affiliation. And then we can also tap the TV network. No? Naiimbita po tayo, na-interview, kasama ko si Dr. Annalisa Forman sa GMA, it's in consumer at iba pa, and the rest. Kasi po, may mga public program ang mga big gun network na libre sa public service. So that's the time na pwede natin ma-introduce at maturuan natin ang mga kababayan natin. Ito lang po, before I end up my speech dito sa ating napakaganda pong summit, gawin lang po natin talagang seryoso na ipagtulungan tayo po. Napakasipag po ng mga health workers natin, the pharmacists, the doctors, all of you in DOH. Saludo po ako doon sa recent, nabasa ko po yung sa, hindi lang yung DPRI, yung Drug Price Index na pinalabas po ng Pharmaceutical Division led by Dr. Annalisa Gutierrez. Kahit po yun, siguro pwede i-advertise natin as basis. You see, the other day, napilitin po akong lumabas para i-check natin kung yung nakapost po yung executive order natin sa Watson, sa Mercury. There are some drugstore na hindi po ito nakapaskel. So kasi po sa batas, nakalagay doon na ang pharmacists and the doctors is kailangan po ipopromote yung generics. Yun lang po ang masasabi ko sa inyo ngayon at doon po sa gustong sumama sa amin sa advokasya na to. nagpapasalamat po ako ng marami dahil kailangan po talaga lalo pong pandemya. Ang ano po kasi nakakaintindi lang dito sa sa generics. Tayo po mga health workers. Sa survey po namin 14% po sa inikot namin ng mga volunteers namin ang nakakaintindi ng generics. So let's make this a full government approach, sabi nga ng ARTA, pero gawin natin pong seryoso. Thank you very much for all of you, and congratulations you guys at the pharmaceutical division, and may our country blessed and protected. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Rick Samaniego. So it was very refreshing to hear about the consumer perspectives, no, on the implementation of the Generics Act and yung mga access pathways natin. So now that we are going to proceed with the panel discussion, let me introduce first our moderator and reactor for today. So Ma'am Leonie, as she is fondly called, is a holder of 3 degrees, BS in Pharmacy, MS in Pharmacy, and MA in Teaching Science. So she actually completed her academic units and had already defended her dissertation proposal for the degree Doctor of Education, major in Educational Management when her family moved to reside in Manila, since she accepted the challenge to be in a team conceptualizing and planning the operation of innovative pharmacy. So she has also been in different areas of pharmacy practice, patient care settings pharmacy, academia as a former dean of the College of Pharmacy, research, public health, administration, and management. And she also held different positions as a manager, country national expert, and vice president for operation and vice president for business development. This work gave her the opportunity to observe and experience the different issues and concerns in the regulation, distribution, and use of medications, and in implementing effective strategies to resolve them. Stranger to the FDA and to the DOH, she has already helped us before in defining the requirements in the licensing institutional pharmacies, outsource hospital outpatient pharmacy, retail outlets for non-prescription drugs, and the F1 Plus Botika ng Bayan. So she was also with the team commissioned in the preparation of the Vigilance Manual in cooperation with international funding agencies commissioned by the DOH. So Ma'am Leonie was also part of the team as the country national expert in the conduct of research studies that may help in development of policies for Philippine pharmaceutical supply chain management, healthcare waste management of health facilities, conduct of medical, surgical, and dental missions, drug and medicine outlets compliant with good pharmacy practice, the DOH Medical and Pharmaceutical Products Quality Manual. In the Philippine Pharmacists Association, she has been the following committee: the CPD Committee, Community Service Committee, a member of the Selection and Awards Committee, and the editor-in-chief of their official publication, the Hygiene. So she was also elected as president for 2 terms, so it was for 4 years, where she effected number of changes from the structure to the operation of the organization, strategic mapping of the PPHA programs, publication of PPHA Ops Manual, development and publication of the Philippine Standards for Pharmacists or PhilSP, and the passage of the 2016 Philippine Pharmacy Law, among others. So she was also a member of the Technical Committee on Pharmacy Education, CHED, the Continuing Professional Development Council, Board of Pharmacy, PRC, the Advisory Council for Healthcare at the Department of Health, the Executive Board of the Medicines Transparency Alliance, and the International Service Advisory Group of the Accreditation Council for Pharmacy Education in Chicago, USA. Currently, she is a member of the Executive Board, Western Pacific Pharmaceutical Forum, an FIP Regional Champion for Antimicrobial Stewardship in the West Pacific, the first and only Filipino elected to the Executive Committee of the International Pharmaceutical Federation Community Pharmacy Section FIP-CPS, and FIP Data and Intelligence, Chair Technical Expert for the Pharmacy Services NC3 program, TESDA, and a consultant to various organizations. So she is also a recipient of 2 lifetime two lifetime awardees, the two lifetime achievement award given by the Federation of Asian Pharmaceutical Association, the PPHA, and the University of San Carlos. She also received the Ishidate Award as the Outstanding Pharmacist in Community Practice in Asia, given by the FAPA, an Alumni Achiever Award, Centennial Award, Visionary Exemplar, Centro Escolar University, December Fidelis Ciencia Award from the University of San Carlos, and the Lourdes Echeluz Leadership Award, FIG Award from the PPHA. So she continues to lead in redefining the landscape of pharmacy practice in the Philippines as chairman of the Board of Trustees and president of the Asia Pacific Institute for Medication Management, or the APIM, and the Hygiene Institute for Education, Research Training as members of the Council of Leaders of the Philippine Pharmacists Association, and a consultant and advisor to both government and non-government organizations. So let us all welcome Ma'am Leonie Ocampo. May we also request our speakers to turn on their cameras and respond na lang to our panel discussion. Thank you very much po. Over to you, Ma'am Leonie.
Thank you so much, Alex. You read the CV, which was intended for PRC. I gave a shorter one. Actually, anyway, thank you very much for the kind introduction. And we are actually given a 40-minute time slot for the panel discussion, but we're a bit behind, so don't worry. Let's make some adjustments and be able to catch it up with time. So I would like first of all to thank our esteemed speakers. We could see, I know you will agree with me, the passion of each of the speaker in giving their share in how they could help and support patients and community access only to quality, cost-effective medicines. They gave very interesting discussion. So I would always remember at times like this, celebrating the passage of Republic Act, the Generics Act. I would always remember what one esteemed pharmaceutical scientist said, Dr. Les Binet, in one of our international congress. And he said, and he was discussing actually about generics, and one in the audience asked a question. Well, you, Dr. Bennett, for one, use generics given that you're an owner and a discover scientist of a number of original molecules. The answer of him was very simple. It was a big sounding yes. But there was a colatelia in the yes answer that he did, that he continued to say only when such generic medicine complies with the quality and efficacy parameters of a certain pharmaceutical preparation, I will definitely be using generics. And I am a pro-generic scientist as well. Now, our speakers give very, very good talking points. In fact, the first speaker we had, Mr. J.P. Tonelletti, emphasized on how important coordinated private and public initiative efforts should be in order to address drug shortages. And he also mentioned how appropriate, I would like to hype on the word appropriate substitution has to be done when needed. Now, Ms. Bagas also gave a very good result of the study that they did that enumerated the causes and frequency of drug shortages. The concerns presented and mentioned are very actionable with only when proper system on inventory management is in place. And I will fully agree with that, having been handling operations of retail pharmacy. And the roadmap presented of the pharmaceutical, local pharmaceutical industry by Dr. Balahadia was also the call for support that PCPI presented is very real. He shared some challenges that our local manufacturing industry experienced, and these are challenges that could be very much acted upon, very well acted upon, and they need just the support of the government. And our Dr. Tameses also I'm very happy to hear that one of the directions that they had in the introduction of the drug that we have now, which is in phase 3 clinical trial already, is it going to be made available for home care services. This is very good because this is one way of us to prevent unnecessary overpopulation of hospitals. Ms. Alhay as well, our president of PPHA, emphasized the need for pharmacists and how important their role is played in every step of the supply chain process in the use of medicine. Attorney Salvador also explained well the TRIPS waiver, and I'm happy because I'm oftentimes receiving questions about this, attorney. What is that TRIPS waiver? And thank you so much for the very clear, simple explanation. And of course, the last but not the least speaker, Mr. Examaniego, mentioned of how prices of medicine is being addressed with the passage of Generics Act. Yes, I agree with you, sir, that pharmacists and all frontliners where patients directly access their medicines play a very important role in the awareness and education of them on what generic medicines really are. We have a number of questions, and we are just trying to see what we could ask with the time that remaining time that we have. And the first question that I would like to give was given by one who did not identify herself or himself. And this is something I know has been discussed yesterday, but for the benefit of those who may have not remembered that this was one thing discussed yesterday, and or maybe was not able to attend in yesterday's session, then we will have to repeat it. The question is this: are there plans, current actions to produce COVID-19 vaccines locally? So maybe, or shall I, Doc Mimi, would you want to answer this? I know this was discussed by Director. Yeah.
Yes, Ma'am Yoni. So again, we have been fortunate to be involved in current efforts of the national government to really scale up or strengthen our capacity for local manufacturing, because this is a realization in the current COVID-19 pandemic. Historically, our country is a country that imports vaccines and even many of our essential medicines, and the COVID-19 pandemic was actually a wake-up call. We have long been calling for strengthening the local industry so that we have self-sufficiency. In fact, I believe that this was an advocacy as far back as Secretary Bengson's time. So self-sufficiency, it was in the national drug policy, but it took how many decades and now a pandemic to really jolt us that we really have to look at self-sufficiency so that we will be better prepared for future pandemics. Yesterday, we had Executive Director Montoya of the DOST-PCHRD discuss with us the plans of the national government. It is a multi-agency government effort, but being led by the Department of Science and Technology on the vaccine self-sufficiency roadmap. But again, we had to invite the Department of Trade and Industry, the Food and Drug Administration, the ARTA, because an effort like this takes a multi-sectoral approach, meaning that it is not just the research and development, it is just not just the Department of Health who should steer this approach. It is a whole of government effort, because we have to have regulatory incentives from the FDA to incentivize our manufacturers. We need to also have trade incentives in terms of VAT exemption or even capitalization. We need to also invest in our science and technology know-how. So that means producing more scientists so that we can have in the future local R&D for our vaccines and therapeutics. It will not take a year to do that, but it is good that we are going to start. So yes, there is an effort, but I think it will be a 10-year roadmap. So the first step will be probably to welcome first our manufacturers. So the government is really putting in place incentives for the manufacturers, both whatever country, so from India, from the United States, from Europe, to really invest in the Philippines and set up manufacturing plants here, have partnerships with the local industry in terms of technology transfer. And hopefully that we can begin with fill and finish in 2 or 3 years. And then in the future, produce our own vaccines.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Guerrero. The second question, I think, is also could also be answered by you, Doc Mee. This is coming from Miss, I don't know if I am pronouncing the name correctly, Miss Lucian Bernal. So she has two questions. One is, how long does it take to apply FDA permit to procure non-PNF drugs for emergency use in COVID, particularly the newer ones? And then the second question is, or I'll give the two already, Doc Mee, because I think this is FDA, and then the second one is with you, NPD. Do we have a national centralized inventory system for government hospital pharmacies that decision makers can access to determine updated stocks of essential medicines in real time?
The first question, so I immediately message Director General Domingo on your question. So the commitment of the FDA, so given that if you have a complete set of requirements, so that means the dossier, the clinical trial data, everything. So for the EUA for vaccines, for example, it takes them 21 days to process. I think it will also take the same time for therapeutics if you are applying for an EUA. But many of our therapeutics for COVID-19 are now through compassionate special permit, and I believe that their turnaround time there is much, much more rapid, like 24 to 48 hours. Some hospitals are feeding back that really they have the FDA has been very responsive in terms of compassionate special permit. I'm looking forward to the day Dr. Beaver Tamesi said that they're now looking into therapeutics for early intervention. We don't want our patients to be treated during the late stages of COVID-19. Unfortunately, what we have now are therapeutics for the late stage of COVID-19 when really you cannot do much for the patient. So we will welcome therapeutics in the early part of COVID-19 where we can stop the viral replication and stop the patients from going into the severe stages. So hopefully we will have those kinds of treatments, Dr. Beaver, in the future. So, and the FDA can also fast track the approvals for patient access. On the second question, we're trying very hard to have a national inventory. It's not easy. We don't have the advanced information systems, admittedly, on inventory pre-pandemic. And now what we're doing is really getting the information from the COVID-19 referral hospitals because that has been the clamor also of the industry so that they can better prepare for the needs of our country. So I think we shared already the projections that we will need for the next 6 months for the critical COVID-19 products with the industry so that they can plan for the allocation for our country. But we are building up that database and hopefully we can share that with the stakeholders. Okay, thank you very much for that question.
Ms. Ocampo, may I have a rejoinder?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. This is Rick Samaniego. Can you see me over there? Kasi yung sa second question about the real time, na kung meron ng nakikita kagad ang that is the clamor of all Filipinos, kaya nga yung we're working with ARTA on this. Yung sa internet natin talagang may problema. Maraming portal na halos online pag mag-i-inquire tayo sa government agencies, and yet hirap na hirap sila sa access, Kaya nga sinasabi nga ni Presidente Duterte, ito yung biggets of life. Ito yung isang legacy na gusto niyang iwan na hindi sana mahirapan ng tao. Pero nakita nyo kahit yesterday, yung kaibigan natin si DG Jeremy Velhica, nahirapan siyang maka-access, nagkaroon ng problema, and it has been our problem in our meeting. So siya yung nagkalat ng Nehemiah. Ang ganda ho ng kwan eh. Tatawag kayo sa mga ahensya ng gobyerno, BIR, DOH and everything. Pero pagka sinet na yung internet, doon ho nagkakaproblema. Kaya po pinupus namin na pumasok yung 3-4 na player dito. Kaya po yan po yung isa, no. And I knew for a fact that during our hearing sa Senate and sa Congress, hindi rin po nasasagot ng DOH yung computerization nila kasi up to 2020 in the last hearing, partially computerized pa lang po ang DOH. Yun po sinabi rin ng ating USEC, ano. And that is true not only with DOH but all other agencies as well. Pati po yung sa SEC. Ito po, hindi ako naglagay. Pero yung bakit ko naparehistro yung Philippine Coalition of Consumer Welfare? Kasi po nung nagpunta ako sa SEC, kaya Director Perdi, sabi niya, mahirap kasi NGO lahat at saka matatagalan po ito. Pero nung sinabi kong, pwede ba magtulungan tayo? Kasi may problema siya sa internet. Natulungan ko po siya in a matter of 2 days na ano po yung Philippine Coalition na registered and attend po tayo sa ASEAN Summit. Dapat po natin tanggapin na siguro full government approach, yung lagi sinasabi namin ni J. Bellica, pero in actuality hindi po. Kaya po dapat siguro magtulong-tulong. We have a budget hearing sa October 13 din ang DOH. And by that time siguro ma-present nila maigi yung mga inventory nila. So yun po yung realities on the ground. Maganda po yung mga internet na natin online portal, pero it doesn't really work that good. Yun po, Ms. Ocampo.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you for this sharing. I think this is where, on that aspect, that is not actually impossible for one to have a very good inventory process or to have a very good inventory system, even in the public sector. I think dito papasok yung most of our speakers were saying that we need the private-public partnership, an initiative to review how the processes happen, because this is not impossible. It can be done. It's a matter of coming up with the right processes. And we can always stop people who have the expertise in how all of this happen in the retail aspect, because this goes down up to the user. There is always a need of the push and the pull process in inventory management. So hindi po imposible. Kaya yung karamihan na ating speaker nagsabi kailangan ng private-public partnership so that things can happen. So, and then another question is this: why will stockouts, they did not identify anymore kung sino ang nagpadala. Why will stockouts of chronic medicines, because it was presented in some of the presentations, happen when they are supposedly predictable in terms of volume requirement in health facilities, if good records of who these people are served as chronic patients are in place in the facility. So parang babalik yan doon sa previous question, Doc Mee. Bakit daw nag-i-stock out ang chronic medicines na predictable siya kung more or less may record tayo ng regular user of this in the respective health facilities? Parang mas mahirap pa nga ito sa private sector kasi patient profiling is not in full force yet. Pero sa public, I think this could be could be done. Tingin mo, Doc Me?
On the information system.
Balik pa rin sa inventory eh. Parang gano'n, no?
Admittedly po, we're working on it on the with the KMITs of the Department of Health as part of the digitization of the Department of Health, but it's not immediate. So at the moment, we are working with an interim information system for COVID-19 products, and hopefully we can work with the private sector to also allow us in monitoring the inventory in even the private hospitals, because right now we have already oriented the COVID-19 referral hospitals, both public and private, but not many of the hospitals are submitting data to us. So that makes it difficult to really see the overall picture in terms of what's currently available in our hospitals.
Thank you, Doc May. And then,
can I comment, Leonie?
yes, Doc.
Yeah.
Doc Weaver.
For chronic medications, let me tell you what the pharma industry saw. What we saw at the start of the pandemic was really a surge of panic buying. People loaded up. So instead of buying their usual requirement, they were buying 2.5 to 3 months worth of stockpile. So people were stockpiling at home. And that really caused major strains in our forecasting because now we were not ready for surges in terms of the demand. After people started getting used to the quarantine situation sometime July, August last year, that's when we started seeing inventories normalize. But at the same time, we did see a greater adherence to therapy. So patients were taking their drugs on a regular basis as prescribed, rather than, oh, I'll do it every other day, because kind of the fear, complications from COVID, etc. So we saw that behavior happen. Now, for hospital products, we did see differences. It's a very different situation with the hospital. Kasi syempre at the start of the pandemic, crashing non-COVID floors. The non-COVID admissions dropped to something like 20% of capacity of the hospital. Overloaded naman sa COVID floors, but the non-COVID floors were like 20% capacity. That finally improved to something like 40% capacity, but then the next surge caused that to dip again. But now we're starting to see that stabilize at about 40%, as hospitals have better adapted to managing the difference or trying to segregate the COVID floor from the non-COVID floor. And then more patients are finally gaining confidence in coming back to the hospital for their non-COVID concerns. So we're starting to see a recovery in the hospital. So at this point in time, potentially you could start again. Hopefully we can better predict and forecast, but we do need to account for if and when we have a new surge like this Delta variant that really caused, again, a haywire in the inventory management. And that's what we've been encouraging people. Take a look at the coming surges being forecasted by our data scientists. They publish regularly on the internet, on Twitter. They actually publish their forecasts on Twitter. Take a look at these forecasts, then potentially we can adjust and supply chain. But remember, we have to remember, globally, it's all Delta. Everybody is seeing this surge. So it's a global problem at this point in time, not just a country problem. At one point, I thought, oh, we're going to be competing with Indonesia, Malaysia for tocilizumab. Now it's the globe that we're competing with to get tocilizumab.
Yeah. Thank you, Doc Beaver. I agree with you because the international data also showed that there was a very big spike in the usage of chronic medications during the first few months of the pandemic. Thank you, Doc Beaver. I hope that enlightens or that answers the question. And then another, I have two more questions to give. Another question is, while we are all into promoting generics for lowering cost of medications, I am a frontliner, but I have some concerns on how other frontliners who may not be familiar with parameters of drug equivalency, where a certain medicine is given a generic equivalent, but they think of it as an equivalent, but it's not even an alternative. So how will we answer this? So are all frontliners interacting directly with patients prepared for this, while we saw a good increase in the generic medicines usage? Because our concern is the safety of the patient.
Yes, may I answer it?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Ocampo. No, very sadly, ang nagtanong pa is frontliner.
Yeah.
And we don't know kung medical allied profession siya. So it seems na talagang medyo maiksi rin ang pag-intindi niya about the generics, no. And actually that is the very main goal of this fora, no, 2 days yung public awareness. Kaya nga po pinipilit ng Philippine Coalition of Consumer Welfare na magkaroon ng education on this. Now, with tocilizumab, sinabi ko nga po, namatayan ako ng biyanan ko the other day, and serious yung bayaw ko. Buti po nakakuha po kami ng stock, okay? And based doon sa media reports, Ms. Ocampo, up to December pa ang stock ng tocilizumab. Pero the truth is, in our one of advisory councils meeting in different agencies, nag-report po sila na up to September 7 na lang ang stock po na yon. So parang tinitingnan namin kung available po sa media na sa merkado, sa online. Kaya siguro gusto namin sigurong tignan at mapatawag kasi po napakagaling ng mga Pilipino. Sabi ko nga, I've been there in the pharmaceutical industry, marketing, logistics, and supply. And also in our advisory council, on the onset of the pandemic last year, yung grupo po namin ang isa sa nagrekomenda na itong mga importer na pharmaceuticals, not only with drugs and medical supplies, unhampered po. Kaya po tuloy-tuloy po ang pasok nila sa custom at sa delivery. And why would I say na maaaring meron pa tayong stock? Kasi po ganun po ang projection na ginagawa namin sa pharmaceuticals noon. Lalo na kung bibigyan kami ng luwag na makapasok yung especially COVID. Kasi po available eh. And yet gustuhin namin klaruhin, baka patawag din namin ang mga importers na ito kung talagang wala na sa merkado. So they have to speak up and do something as far as the government is concerned. NBI at tignan kung ano yung mga nagbebenta sa online. Kasi po baka mapeki tayo. Kasi ang kata po dito is 15,000, ang nakuha po is 80,000 na. Sabi nga ng speaker kahapon, kahit na 1 milyon, okay, basta mabuhay lang po. Kaya po yun yung reality na nangyayari sa ground. Kaya gusto namin na educated lahat po as a healthcare provider or health alam na po natin yan at sila po talaga nakakatipid yung sa generics, hindi po yung mga tao. Yun lang po with regards doon sa tocilizumab. Nabuhay po yun. Hindi po. Namatay.
Thank you. Thank you, Sir Rick.
Thank you.
I'm actually throwing the challenge to the Philippine Pharmacist Association. I think this is one area that you have to also come up again with a program on how the education and awareness campaign. Now, because the question actually is on the parameter of equivalency, because it's a given that they may have the same generic name, but they may not be of the same, that we cannot consider them possessing the equivalency requirement. So the only way we could protect the patient is to have one which is an equivalent whose efficacy and quality is established by the innovator molecule or brand.
So po yung tagline ng FDA, miski nung in-start. Basta po dumaan po sa FDA, ang the same product like amoxicillin 500 milligram generic compared to brand, equal po yung equivalent niyan. Matagal na po, 33 years na.
Yes, sir. That's one requirement, that they should not buy one that is not registered, because definitely the quality of that has not been checked, whether it complies to what is written in the label. So another question is, given the difficulty to access medicines now used for COVID patients, is there a number that the patient or the concerned individual can call for the government to assist to where they could access that particular preparation? It's talking of accessibility. Others are having difficulty in accessing some medications used for COVID patients now. So they don't know if we have a number where they can call. Yes, Doc May?
Okay, right now, there is really a hotline for most of the COVID-19 medicines naman are available in the hospitals. And we have a hotline for the One Hospital Command. We cannot just be giving out the COVID-19 therapeutics. As I said, these are mostly investigational. And right now, most drugs are accessed through the Compassionate Special Permit. And there are regulations in place at the FDA that every facility will have to account on how the medicines are used. The outcome should be reported in terms of safety and effectiveness to the FDA. So we cannot just be giving out the medicines left and right. They really have to access the One Hospital Command at the right facility where they can be monitored by the physicians, where the proper administration can be observed. So just please refer to the One Hospital Command. We will be assisting the patients as much as possible.
Thank you, Doc Meme. Thank you. Actually, even the Philippine Pharmacist Association is extending their assistance also where to access sometimes medicines that are needed by patients. Okay, so this is the last question, and all questions actually is directed towards Doc Meme answering. While pharmacist is required in rural health facilities with the introduction or the revival of the Botika ng Bayan as introduced by the Department of Health, how could the DOH facilitate it to happen when in other LGUs, medicines continue to be handled by people and stored in places where environmental conditions does not favor protecting its integrity? So this is a question.
This has been our advocacy, Ma'am Yoni, with the PPHA before, to have good pharmacy practice in all facilities, whether public or private. When we were pushing for the Pharmacy Act, there were flexibilities in place, but still we recognize that in all facilities, whether when you are storing medicines, there really needs to be a pharmacist or at least a pharmacy assistant to be taking care of the supply chain management. So how will we do this now with the Mandanas ruling? Given that not all LGUs have pharmacies. So this is something that we are looking at together with our Health Human Resource Development Bureau. So the funds will go to the LGU starting next year. A condition has to be set with the LGUs that if you are going to buy medicines, then it is mandatory for you to really have a pharmacist in your health facilities or a pharmacy assistant at least in the 4th to 5th class municipalities, and the Department of Health will assist them in terms of capacity building on good pharmacy practice, creating their own therapeutics committees, having good supply chain management in the facility so that we really prevent the expiration of products or the under forecasting or over forecasting of medicines. In the future, we are also looking at public-private collaboration. So we don't see the public sector to be doing everything. So when the outpatient drug benefit or the comprehensive outpatient drug benefit of PhilHealth is implemented, we will not just rely on the public sector supply chain, but we will work also with the existing chain or drugstores to be access points for the outpatient drug benefit because the public sector cannot really do everything. Okay, so please wait for that when PhilHealth, when we discuss already the comprehensive outpatient drug benefit with PhilHealth.
Thank you very much, Doc Mimi. It's good that you mentioned of good pharmacy practice because that's what we are espousing with the pharmacy sector in order to protect the product that our manufacturing companies, both multinational and local, where quality is built into the production of the product, to have it still be in the product until it gets to the hands of the user. So there has to be somebody who takes care in every step of the distribution process or supply chain process. So thank you so much, Doc Me, because no amount of quality product produced by our very good manufacturing companies could give the optimum benefit that it is intended to be giving to the patient if it's not well handled, it's not well stored, and not used properly by the user. So thank you. And that was the last question. Thank you so much. Again, I would like to thank our dear speakers for the very good sharing that you give. People, I'm sure, will agree with me. All those who are on board with us today will agree with me that we all learn a lot from our esteemed speakers. And we look forward of all of this to move the way we look at it. And congratulations also to our Department of Health Pharmaceutical Division, the team headed by Dr. Mimi Guerrero, for a very good celebration of the Generic Summit and choosing very good speakers, giving their share of the topics assigned to them. So thank you so much. So back to Alex.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Leonie. Thank you also to our speakers for that very fruitful discussion. So for the next part of our program, I would like to invite again to the virtual stage Dr. Melissa Guerrero to announce the winners of the Generics Awareness Month TikTok Challenge. Dr. Guerrero, over to you po.
Thank you very much, Alex. So this is just a brief part of our program this morning, just recognizing all those who participated in our TikTok challenge. So just an introduction how we came about with this idea. So we're now using all virtual platforms on our advocacy. Can we show everyone our mechanics? So at the start of the Generics Month, we launched this initiative for our hospitals and regional health centers to participate in our TikTok challenge. Can we show our slide? And we have the following mechanics. Next slide, please. So there's a TikTok information video where they will provide information on what's the difference between a branded generics, and then also we had TikTok dance videos where we have a lot of entries. We're quite happy with the entries, and we have some criteria for judging. With regard to the TikTok information video, of course, there's accuracy of content, audience impact, the number of reactions elicited, the props and costumes, and the originality and creativity and overall performance. So for the TikTok dance videos, wala naman itong masyadong content, and some of the criteria that we use for the TikTok information video are also there. So for the winners, we don't have much to give, but we're quite happy that a lot of them participated. So you will be getting the following merchandises from the Pharmaceutical Division Department of Health. So our official T-shirts and bags, or laptop bags and jackets. So we will send this out to the winners beginning next week. Thank you very much for participating. I think we can go now to the awarding.
bawal walang mask at face shield. I, i-sanitize ang kamay at iwasan ang kulog na lugar. B, lumistansya na 1 metro at limitahan ang physical na interaksyon sa iba. A, alamin ang tamang informasyon. Plus, suportahan ang FDA-approved na bakuna.
Every month of September, we celebrate the Generics Awareness Month. So why is it important to have a Generics Awareness Month and why we need to celebrate it? We celebrate it to remind the people na hindi kailangang branded o mamahalin yung gamot para masabing ito ay epektibo. In fact, there are lots of medicines with generic counterparts with good quality na makakatipid tayo and at the same time can give benefits that we need from a medicine. So anong pinagkakaiba ng generic na gamot sa branded na gamot? Wala! Dahil tulad ng mga branded na gamot, bago ma-approve ng FDA ang mga generic na gamot, kinakailangan na mapatunayan ng mga drug companies na ang kanilang mga generic na gamot ay kapareha ng mga branded na gamot. Kapareha in terms of active ingredient and also ang dami o ang laman ng gamot, ganun din ang paggamit, paraan ng paggamit, at dosage form ng gamot. And of course, kinakailangan din nilang mapatunayan na safe and effective ang kanilang mga gamot. Bakit mas mura yung generic na gamot kaysa sa branded na gamot? Una sa lahat, hindi na nila kinakailangan pang ulitin ang mga clinical at animal studies ng mga gamot na ito. Marami ring generic na gamot ang naa-approve kaya nagkakaroon ng competition at bumababa ang mga presyo ng gamot na ito. And also, let's not forget yung marketing pagdating sa mga branded na gamot. Other than that, ikaw naman ang mag-decide kung ang gusto mong inumin ay generic o branded na gamot.
Magandang umaga po. Meron po ba kayong available na gamot? Ito po nireseta sa akin ng aking doktor.
Hello sir, meron po.
Magkano po kaya?
Meron tayo sir, 38.75.
Mahal po pala. Wala po bang mas mura?
Meron sir, meron po tayo ng generic.
Pero, ba't parang iba yung pangalan na nireseta sa akin ni Doc?
Bali sir, ang nakalagay kasi sa reseta mo, branding ng gamot. Ito namang binibigay ko sa sir, ito yung generic na gamot. Same effect naman yan sir.
Ay, wait lang. Tatanong ko muna kay Doc kasi parang iba yung nakasulat sa reseta na ginawa niya.
Pep. Para sa kalaman ng nakararami, isa lamang ito sa mga tagpong nagaganap sa isang pharmacy, kung saan ang nilalagay ni Doc sa reseta ay ang branding ng gamot, na kung saan ito ay lumalabag sa batas na naipasa noong 1988 o kilala bilang RA 6675, mas kilala sa tawag na The Generics Law of 1988. Ang batas na ito ay naghihikayat, nag-uutos at nagtataguyod sa paggamit ng generic name, sa pag-angkat, pagmamanufacture, pamamahagi, pag-aanunsyo, at sa pagreseta at pagbibigay ng mga gamot. Isa din sa layunin ng batas na ito na makapagbigay ng gamot sa pinakamababang halaga sa mga pasyenteng indigent o mahihirap.
Ganun ho ba, sir? Maraming salamat po sa info na binigay niyo sa akin. Ngayon naintindihan ko na kung bakit may branded at saka generic na gamot.
Welcome, sir. Kung may mga katanungan kayo tungkol sa mga gamot, nandito kami mga pharmacist para magbigay payo at aral tungkol sa mga gamot.
Generics Awareness Month. Paigtingin ang Suplay. Generics gawing Abot-kamay. kagamutan, the best pa rin yan. It's gonna be a bumpy ride.
Generics Month.
The Generics Act of 1988, also known as Republic Act 6675. This law was written to ensure sufficient supply of medicines in the country at the lowest possible cost. It is an act to promote, require, and ensure the production of an adequate supply, distribution, use, and acceptance of drugs and medicines identified by their generic names.
Generics Month.
Baby, if they asking, tell 'em, tell 'em, tell 'em, tell 'em, I go crazy. Think I'm getting butterflies, but it's really something telling me the wrong way. No, hey, love, baby, I'm the reason why hell's so hot.
I think those are all our winners for this year's Generic Summit. So again, congratulations to everyone and thank you for participating in our TikTok challenge. As for the rest of the participants in our Generic Summit, thank you very much from our partners from the public sector, the private sector, PHAP, PCPI, and also the PPHA for always being with us in our advocacy. Again, we highlight the efforts of the government together with the private sector, not only during this time of the pandemic, while it took a pandemic for us to really come together. I hope that the synergy between the public and private sector will be there, whether there's a pandemic or not. In fact, we have to really work together so that we can build our own supply sufficiency now and into the future. Thank you very much po again for participating and also in our panel discussion.
Thank you po, Doc Meme. Can we request our speakers, Sir JP, Ma'am Joy, Sir Dr. Beaver, Ma'am Gigi, Attorney Tony, Sir Rick, And Ma'am Leonie po, we'll just have a short photo doc na lang po. Can you turn on your camera na lang po? So, sino po magbibilang?
Wait,
Okay.
sandali lang ha, sandali lang. Inaayos lang natin. So, sandali, wait. Pwede na. Pwede na ba?
No video pa. No video pa po si Sir Rick and Ma'am Gigi.
Meron na ba ako? Video?
Wala pa po.
Wala pa, sir.
Ba't ganun? Yeah. Kita ko na yung sarili ko ah. Ang gaganda nyo pala, pero ako ba di nyo makita? Time nakita ko, may sakit yan eh. I'm pushing my... wala pa rin. Siguro yung picture ko na lang.
Okay. Just post your picture po, Sir Rick. Don't worry.
Ang gaganda pala ng mga staff mo, kumukha mo, Doktora Meme.
Open video, PPDRU, open your videos, cameras.
Okay.
So I'll be taking the photo po.
Wala yung picture.
Smile, 1, 2. One more time. 1, 2. Okay naman po, last. Sayang po yung iba walang video.
Ang ganda oh. Si Simon, kala ko may sakit na yan eh. Ang ganda-ganda pa rin.
Thank you very much po to everyone.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Congratulations.
Salamat po. Happy lunch po.
Thank you very much to everyone po sa uulitin. Salamat po.
Ulitin po.
Salamat and congratulations.
Salamat.
Thank you, Ma'am Leonie. Bye